Smith speaking. I'm chair of the HART Board of Directors. Welcome, everyone, to the regular board meeting that is being conducted virtually on August 3rd, 2020. Please look at the screens of your devices where an image of the flag is displayed and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Danielle will please take attendance. Ms. Arthur.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. This is Danielle from HART. Please say here after your name is called. Director Castor.
Here.
Director Harden.
Has left the meeting.
Here.
Director Kemp.
Here.
Here. Director Knight.
Here.
Director McLean indicated he would be absent. Director Mechanic.
Here.
Director Miller.
Here.
Director Overman.
Here.
Director Schisler.
Here.
Chair Smith.
Here.
Director Vieira. Director Vieira. Director Williams.
Present. I'm here.
Thank you. You do have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Arthur. And now the HART General Counsel, David Smith, will read into the record the rules for participation in a virtual meeting. Good morning, Mr. Smith.
Good morning, Madam Chair. First off, thank you for your participation in this virtual meeting. The change of meeting location from in-person at the HART Administrative Office to a virtual meeting is pursuant to Executive Order Number 20-179, extending Executive Order 20-69 by the Governor of the State of Florida on July 29, 2020, and Section 120.54 Florida statutes. Due to social distancing, the boardroom in the EBOR Administrative Office is only accessible for personnel facilitating the meeting. Please keep your devices and phones muted when not speaking. Muting the sound and microphone in your devices helps avoid feedback. Please do not enable the video/camera on your devices and discontinue all personal conversations for the duration of the meeting. Please follow along with a copy of the meeting agenda and material sent via email. All presentations will be shared on the screen while presented. Roll call will be taken for attendance, as it already has been, and voting by HART staff. Quorum and voting taken by the HART staff. Quorum and voting results will be announced. There will be an opportunity for members of the public who have pre-registered with HART staff to provide comments. General Counsel will read into the record for the public comment participation rules. During the meeting, please wait until the chair asks for comments or questions from committee board members for each agenda item as the meeting progresses through the agenda. When you want to provide a comment or ask a question, please signal that you want to speak by activating the hand button in the white circle next to the name on your screen. The hands will turn blue when activated. Staff will read the hands raised in order for the chair to acknowledge. Then the participant may unmute their device and speak. Please speak your name before you comment. Presenters, please note that all presentations will be controlled by HART staff. Ensure that you state your name, title, and company organization for the record. Please say next slide when to the presentation. Thank you.
Has joined the meeting.
Okay, we are hearing feedback from somebody's device. If you would all try to mute your devices when you're not speaking, that will be helpful. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Smith. At this point, we move to the approval of the minutes from our regular Board of Directors meeting on July 20th, 2020.
So moved.
Williams, second. Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Kemp, second by Ms. Williams. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. Ms. Arthur, please take a roll call vote.
Yes, ma'am. Please say yes or no after your name is called. Director Castor?
Yes.
Director Harden?
Yes.
Director Kemp?
Yes.
Director Knight?
Yes.
Director Mechanic?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Director Overman?
Yes.
Director Schisler?
Yes.
Chair Smith?
Yes.
Director Vieira?
Yes.
Director Williams?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have public input on the agenda items and general topics. Mr. Smith will read the rules for public comment.
Yes, good morning again, Madam Chair. The board welcomes public comments about any issues and concerns that has made provisions to allow for virtual public comment. Public comments offered virtually will be afforded equal consideration as if they were offered in person. Anyone wanting to provide public comment for any HART committee or board meeting should contact Danielle Arthur, board at arthurd@gohart.org or at 813-955-2426 with your name and phone number for pre-registration. Comments are due by 5 p.m. the day previous of the meeting. Staff will call on speakers by name in the order in which registrations were received. All callers will be muted upon calling and unmuted in the submission order after being recognized by name. Please state your full name and organization/address if desired. Up to 3 minutes are allowed for each speaker, and the speaker will be muted once time is up. We have 2 pre-registered speakers as of Sunday evening when I received the email from Danielle. It was Chris Vila and Tina D. Williams. Staff, would you please proceed?
Yes.
Good morning, Madam Chair. This is Yolanda Jennings with HART. And as Mr. Smith noted, we have one caller right now, and that's Mr. Chris Vela, and he is available.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Vela. You are recognized.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for accommodating board. So this is Chris Vela. I live in Ybor City, 33605. I'm here to talk about a couple items on the agenda. I have to say I'm a little bit brokenhearted that a lot of the district-wide and citywide folks haven't really gone out to get a lot of the transit activists to get involved in this meeting. But let me go ahead and just dive on my personal comments. You're going to be approaching in your agenda the Streetcar endorsement. So this is for the board to endorse a justification on this project to FTA to get funding, and I think that you guys should move forward with that. I know that there is a big money crunch to that, and, the issue is that, how we're going to get the funding, but I think we can make it work, and honestly, we know that if AFT doesn't make it, I should hope that the district-wide commission will be supporting, like, a second referendum. It might not be next year or the year after, but we need to get it done because we just don't have enough funding at all. And then going over to the ferry, I don't really see this project as a foundation project. Unlike the streetcar system, unlike CSX, unlike our bus system, that's a foundation project. What the ferry is just kind of like a supplement to it. And I think that $2.4 million really could go further into our bus system or just to try to create safer access to the bus shelters themselves. I've noticed, there's a lot of people talking about CSX or excited about it, but nobody's going to the neighborhoods of East Tampa. Nobody's going to Ybor City, Palmetto Beach. You have to spend some of this money for outreach. You have to get the conversation of land use involved and also participation in the neighborhood. Otherwise, you're not going to get momentum in this plan whatsoever. So I wouldn't move forward with that project as a priority, or with the NPO. I'm sorry, with the HART backing that. And then going over to CSX, I strongly urge the HART to consider to do a supplemental environmental impact statement. I think this project has a lot of credibility. It can serve a lot more trips, job trips, beyond the ferry system. In fact, you will see surveys in part of your agenda that ranks the CSX system way, way beyond the ferry system, even on job growth. So I would strongly consider that. And lastly, Tabata is going to come and say, we want your support as well. There shouldn't be a priority. I think that all of our counties need to own up to dealing with their own transportation issues before Hillsborough County comes in and contributes 40% of our taxpayer dollars to solve their own problems. So that's my comment. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker.
Ma'am, the next speaker did not come online, so Danielle does have a comment that she's going to read.
All right, thank you. Ms. Arthur, you're recognized.
Thank you. This is Danielle from HART. The public comment was received on Friday at 11:18 a.m. from an Andre Carr. It says, quote, "Hello, my name is Andre Carr. I would like to see if HART would run Route 39, run 15 or 20 minutes, and Saturday and Sunday every 30 minutes. That was, end quote. That was the end of the comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Arthur. And now we have recognition of employees. Our Deputy of Transportation, Ruthie Reyes-Burkhardt, will read bios and recognize the operations of staff.
Thanks for using WebEx.
Thank you.
Visit our website at www.webex.com.
Good morning, this is Ruthie Reyes-Burkhardt. We'll be recognizing the Operator of the Month for April 2020, Bus Operator Kimberly Amador. Operator Amador was hired on May 19 of 2014, and we thank her for her service. Operator of the Month for May 2020 is Bus Operator Gregory Carswell. Operator Carswell has been with HART since July of 2005, and we thank him for his service. And Operator of the Month for June 2020 is Bus Operator Michael Burnett. Operator Burnett was hired in November 14 of 2005. He's a fixed route bus operator as well as a cross-trained streetcar motorman, a certified operator instructor, and a member of the Million Mile Club. He enjoys getting his customers to their destination and in a safe and a professional manner. And we thank him for his service, and we congratulate all three operators.
Thank you. Million Mile Club, that's impressive. Our next recognitions will be read by Deputy of Maintenance, Scott Drainville.
Good morning, Scott Drainville, Deputy Chief of Maintenance and Facilities. The Maintenance Employee of the Month for April 2020, James Johnson. James is a paint and body bead technician and has been with HART since June of 2017. James has a reputation of being a non-stop workhorse in the body shop. He played an intricate role in the design and installation of the HART Flex Van driver safety shields. James is always front and center when the body shop is given a project or special task and consistently completes them in a timely fashion, always assisting his fellow workers with repairs or ideas on how to work more efficiently. Thank you, James. For Maintenance Employee of the Month for May of 2020, Luis Sanchez Hernandez. Luis is a service lane attendant and has been with HART since April 2005. Each night, Luis is tasked with having buses and vans ready for service as he fuels, cleans, probes fare boxes, and runs vehicles through the bus wash. Luis's attention to detail has prevented many roll calls from being our last line of defense when it comes to finding defects. He's the one we assigned to train all the new hired service attendants, knowing that we will train them to work at the most efficient level. Louis is always looking for ways to improve the service lane and make things more productive. Thank you, Louis. For Maintenance Employee of the Month for June 2020, Arnold Meadows. Arnold is a master mechanic and has been with HART since March of 2016. Arnold's knowledge and experience has definitely raised the bar in the shop. Consistently exceeds the expectation of repairing and completing multiple tasks each day. Always eager and ready for work, never knowing if he's having a challenging day or not. Arnold possesses many qualities that make him the ideal employee. Skilled, dependable, dedicated, and humble are only a few of his great leadership skills. Thank you, Arnold. For Teamster of the Quarter for second quarter 2020, Fernando Ramos Cardona. Fernando started his journey with HART in July of 2007 as a streetcar facilities attendant. In April of 2016, Fernando was promoted to streetcar facilities technician, and just this past October, he was promoted to streetcar maintenance supervisor, where he ensures that the work done adjacent to the line is properly monitored by streetcar personnel. In early July, Fernando performed emergency repairs on the overhead catenary system to restore service after damage occurred to the line. His actions in ensuring that all proper safety protocols were followed prevented serious injury to all contractors working along that line. Fernando has assured coverage of all maintenance shifts during the last 3 months with limited personnel while maintaining pre-arranged schedules with vendors and contractors. Fernando is always researching new and improved ways to address the streetcar service. Thank you, Fernando.
Thank you, Mr. Drainville. And our final one is will be read by Interim Chief People Officer Crystal Hundley. Ms. Hundley.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes. Good morning. For the non-bargaining employee of the quarter for the second quarter of 2020, it is my pleasure to say Kelly White
has joined the meeting.
Manager of Labor Relations. Kelly White has been an employee of HART for 16 years. Her entire career has been in human resources because she enjoys working with people. Kelly is definitely a people person and has won over the workforce with her constant smile, professionalism, and positive outlook. Kelly demonstrates great leadership with all those who she comes in contact with. Kelly is a collaborative problem solver and continues to seek ways to implement employee ideas while addressing employee concerns. She makes employees feel important and safe in the workplace. Kelly White is what makes HART a great place to work. When she's not hard at work, you can find Kelly at the beach enjoying life. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. And speaking on behalf of the board, I would like to thank all of the employees we have honored here today, our bus operators, and our team that keeps the buses running.
Has joined the meeting.
Essential workers. And that's especially clear now in this pandemic. We are especially aware of how critical their service is, those on the front lines, driving the buses, and those working hard behind the scenes. And so we thank all the employees that were recognized today and congratulate them on their jobs well done. Thank you. So that takes us to the item number 5 on our agenda, approval of the action items that are not reviewed by the HART board committees. And we have 2 of those. 5A is a resolution authorizing board members virtual training. Ms. Lena Pettit, Chief of Policy and Performance, will present the action item. Good morning, Ms. Pettit. You're recognized.
Good morning, Madam Chair, HART board members. Before you today, for your review and consideration, the resolution number 2020-0823, authorizing board members virtual training. American Public Transportation Association, APTA, offers a few virtual training opportunities for transit board members. One was actually in the end of July, and that was for the Sustainability and Mobility Planning Workshop. And the other one is upcoming in August, and the cost associated with the training is only for registration, which is very minimal this year. And we are looking for board members who are interested in these training opportunities to express interest and let the staff know if we would register them for these interesting virtual conferences.
Thank you. So I took one of these, but it was a free one by APTA in the last couple months and got a lot out of it. It is a good opportunity. So are there any board members who would like to take advantage of this?
This is Commissioner Kemp. I'd also like to know, now that they're doing them virtually, if we can, even after the fact, kind of watch them or have them available. Is that part of it?
Commissioner Kemp, this is Lena Pettit again. Yes. the APTA is making sure that they have presentations that were made during conferences available through their portal, and I will make this connection with APTA staff to obtain the link and share with board members those access to those presentations.
I'd be very interested. Do we need a motion on this to approve it? So moved?
Yes. Is there a second authorizing board members' virtual training?
I'll second that.
Was that Commissioner Overman?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Is there anyone else who wants to take the training, or Lena, can they contact you after?
Madam Chair, Ms. Williams, and I would like to connect with Lena afterwards and see what the schedule presents. So I would very much be interested in taking virtual training.
Yes, ma'am.
Great.
Also, Director McLean expressed interest in attending the conference, a virtual conference in August.
Great.
Likewise, Hardin's interested.
Thank you, Dr. Hardin.
Marvin Knight, Director Knight, interested.
Yep. It's a great opportunity to take these, be involved in these conferences at low cost without having to travel also. So there's a silver lining to this virtual business.
Did you get Director Knight?
Yes,
sir.
Director Knight.
Director, I will actually also would like to attend. This is Commissioner Overman.
Thank you, Commissioner
All right.
Overman.
Great. So we have so far Commissioner Kemp, Ms. Williams, Director McLean, Director Hardin, Director Knight, and Director Overman. And if there's anyone else, I think they can be accommodated by contacting Ms. Pettit.
Absolutely.
So at this point, we have a motion to approve Resolution 2020-08-23, authorizing board members virtual training. And motion by Commissioner Kemp, second by Commissioner Overman. Any discussion? Seeing none. Ms. Austin, please take a roll call vote.
Thank you. Please say yes or no after your name is called. Director Castor?
Yes.
Director Hardin?
Yes.
Director Kemp?
Yes.
Director Knight? Director Knight? Director Mechanic?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Director Overman?
Yes.
Director Schisler?
Yes.
Chair Smith?
Yes.
Director Vieira?
Yes.
Director Williams?
Yes.
Director Knight?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next action item is 5B, agenda item, and it is a resolution authorizing the interim CEO for the renewal and execution of the interlocal agreement between Hillsborough HART and Hillsborough County for the purchase of bus passes for the transportation disadvantaged clients of Hillsborough County until September 30th, 2025. Emmanuel Nunez, Manager of Revenue and Retail, will present this action item. Mr. Nunez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, board members, and good morning, Madam Chair. This is Emmanuel, Manager of Revenue and Retail Sales. The action item, it is to authorize the interim Chief CEO Officer to renew and execute on behalf of HART the interlocal agreement between HART and Hillsborough County. The county uses this agreement to purchase bus passes for transportation disadvantaged clients, and they use Sunshine Line to be able to provide and distribute these passes to the clients inside Hillsborough County. They do a lot of purchases. They distribute almost about $700,000 worth of bus passes. I'm sure if any of you have any questions.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions by the board?
Move approval. Commissioner Miller, move approval.
Thank you, Mr. Miller, Commissioner Miller.
Schistler.
All right, we have a motion for approval by Commissioner Miller, second by Councilman Schistler. Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Arthur, please take a roll call vote.
Thank you. Please say yes or no after your name is called. Director Castor?
Yes.
Director Harden?
Yes.
Director Kemp? Director Kemp?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Director Knight?
Yes.
Director Mechanic? Director Mechanic?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Director Overman?
Yes.
Director Schistler?
Yes.
Chair Smith?
Yes.
Director Vieira?
Yes.
Director Williams?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving into agenda item number 6. We have the presentations. We have 4 presentations, and I'm going to ask everybody to move as quickly as possible through these because it is a very full agenda. But I have to say today must be Fixed Guideway Day at HART because our first 3 presentations are 3 different fixed guideway projects. The first is the Envision Tampa Streetcar project. Mr. Vic Bede with the City of Tampa, Steve Shoecraft with HDR, Jeff Booth with Infra Strategies, and Linda Crescentini from HART will all join to co-present this item. And welcome to all of you. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, and good morning, Board. Truly appreciate this opportunity to give an update on the Envision Tampa Streetcar System, the project, and the program. There is an action item after this for the Board, and we're requesting support from the Board to move forward with getting rated as part of the FTA funding process. Being rated will allow us to be in line for federal funding next year when the federal budget comes out. But I'd like to take a quick step back and highlight our decades-long partnership with HART. Transit is extremely critical to the city. We're among the densest areas within the region where transit conducive. All of our development services, transportation, sustainability and resilience, and inclusivity plans within the city depend on reliable, robust transit. So we're very well aligned. We'll continue to be good partners. As far as the streetcar is concerned, we've always envisioned the streetcar to be part of a region-wide system that serves high-capacity routes as part of a network that augments BRT and regular bus service. Our goal is to connect places identified in our, which is the cities, and also regional planning documents like the MPO and their Assets and Opportunities Study and other critical considerations like regional transit. And this includes connections to the airport, USF, CSX, the current alignment crosses CSX lines twice. And so we see this as part of a whole, a high-capacity part of a whole. I want to emphasize that. Our FTA ratings request is predicated on the surtax being upheld as is. This is really important to understand. What we're saying is we're moving forward with the process given the law of the land is that the surtax is upheld. Funds are anticipated to be allocated from the fixed guideway bucket only, as envisioned, as coordinated with HART over the last 4 years. So nothing there has changed. And also what we're saying is the alignment that is proposed is a result of studied consideration and significant community and stakeholder outreach. of which both the city and HART were partners, and we continue this partnership as co-project managers. Should the surtax be struck down or modified, we do recognize that we need to get back to the drawing board and come up with a different plan. We'd like to suggest that that time is not right now because there are one of many scenarios possible. So let's cross that bridge when we get there. We understand that HART has expressed concerns around governance, around funding, around MOUs, historical and current, and also going forward with a new system. We've worked with the staff, HART staff, over the last 2 weeks, identified what are the areas we need to address, worked with our legal department internally, and initiated a process. Our goal is to, again, build a strong partnership and have everyone be comfortable with our process. And that's really all I have in terms of starting remarks. Next slide, please. I'll kind of walk through what this presentation is going to be about. We've already touched upon the request, but we'll go over the FTA process once again so you understand better what part of the process this is in. Next slide, please. We'll also go over some of the challenges, especially around the uncertainty and some of the concerns that HART had put forth. Next slide. A quick look at the team that's going to present. It's the Tampa and HART team supported by our respective consultants. A couple of points to note. HDR on their team has Stephanie McVeigh. She's the FTA lead. She actually worked at the FTA and has seen many projects through their details deployed. And of course, as part of InfraStrategy's team, we also have Jeff Booth, who also has a lot of experience with the policy aspects of FTA funding and projects.
A participant has left the meeting.
So at this point, I'll hand over to HDR, who will take the next part of this presentation forward. Steve? And next slide, please.
Yes, thank you, Vic. This is Steve Shecraft with HDR.
Has joined the meeting.
If you could go to the next slide, please. I'll provide a quick project overview to give you a report on where we stand with the project from the last couple of years of work that we've done and where we'll be heading next. So next slide, please. So as we continue through this process to develop the project and clarify and refine recommendations about how the expansion should occur and how modernization happens, we continue to check back with the larger goals for the project. Modernization and extension of the existing system, improving access across the full core of downtown Tampa and downtown Tampa's adjacent and growing neighborhoods, connecting premier cultural entertainment, destinations, educational institutions, and urban neighborhoods, delivering first mile and last mile connectivity to regional services, which is really key to allow folks to access from the region destinations across the full footprint of downtown and to set the stage for future extensions. Next slide, please. As Vic mentioned, this process is proceeded with the City of Tampa as the leader of the project. The first phases of work were supported with funding from the city as well as DOT, and HART has been a partner through that process. Next slide. The existing system and the extension is focused on connecting destinations across the full footprint of the larger definition of what downtown Tampa is. And one of these stats that's important to remember is that there's about $6 billion of private investment in the pipeline, and that's real money being spent on real projects across the full alignment from the existing system through the extension. And this provides important connections between those destinations without adding significant volume to an already kind of challenged and constrained downtown roadway network. Next slide, please. Through the effort, we've coordinated with the number of projects that provide important connections to downtown and the rest of the region. That includes coordination with the Arterial BT project, the Heights Mobility Study, TBART's Regional Rapid Transit Project, DOT's work on looking at sites for potential future intermodal center, and then coordination with Virgin Railroad. So as those projects touch the edges of downtown or penetrate portions of downtown, the streetcar provides the possibility of circulating through the full extent of downtown to make those trips really reasonable, accessible, and convenient. Next slide. So as we've worked through the project development phase, there are several things that we've looked at. We've looked at the importance of delivering high-quality, accessible service. So full-day frequent service, one-seat trip from end to end of the system, high-capacity vehicles, highly accessible vehicles, so we don't have to slow the system down when we deploy the ramp for the existing vehicles to allow for handicap accessibility. We're designing the system for use by other transit vehicles, so the guideway that we're talking about for the extension can accommodate BRT and local bus vehicles, and the stops can be shared between streetcar and vehicles. We're looking at ways to maximize travel time reliability for the system and to minimize impacts on roadway, on right-of-way, and on cultural and archaeological resources. Next slide. We talk about the system in two parts. There's modernization of the existing system and extension. And the extension is designed to set the stage for future extensions that could go north or west or loop back to Ybor City. That can be determined by the study. So in the modernization section, we focus on introducing modern vehicles, upgrading traffic, upgrading the stops, expanding the streetcar barn, the facility where HART board would typically meet, and upgrading the power system. And the extension, we've looked at a series of different alignments for the extension and settled on an alignment that follows the primary traffic patterns on Florida and Tampa, going north from Whiting to Palm Avenue and south on Tampa back to the Poe Garage to the existing terminus stop. Next slide, please. The extension is 1.3-mile extension, Palm Avenue and Tampa Heights. Runs along Florida Avenue and Tampa Avenue as a split. Mostly exclusive guideway, except for the constrained sections of Florida between approximately Harrison, north of Palm. And the system is being designed with right-side stops. And if you know a typical city bus or most BRT vehicles, they have stops. The doors are on the right-hand side of the vehicle. So the stops can be shared with streetcar and with local buses and future BRT buses. Next slide. I mentioned quickly the modernization improvements that are included in the project, and they include guideway reconstruction on some of the tight turns to accommodate the modern streetcar vehicles, improvements to the existing stations to improve accessibility to the new vehicles, and then the streetcar barn expansion, and upgrading traction power to support the modern vehicles and the greater extent of the service. Next slide, please. What drives a lot of changes on the modernized section is the introduction of a new vehicle. So these are low-floor vehicles that allow for level boarding from the platform into the vehicle. So wheelchairs, strollers, bikes can be rolled directly on the vehicle and in the vehicle for service. The vehicle configurations are highly flexible, so we can look at how much space to accommodate for seating, for wheelchair positioning, and for bike use as we move forward with the design, so they're highly flexible service. These are also higher speed with a longer service life than the existing replica vehicles. Next slide, please. So we follow FDA's structure in developing the project cost estimates. The capital cost estimates are $210 million. That includes modernization and extension costs and the new vehicles. When that gets escalated to year of expenditure dollars, so there's a formula that describes when those costs hit the project, when the construction is underway, the total cost. goes to $237 million based on the existing estimates, with the O&M cost per year of approximately $8 million at the start of service. So that's $8 million in 2024, 2025 dollars. And we've received preliminary approval from FTA to define both modernization and extension investments as eligible for funding under the Small Starts program, and Stephanie will talk more about that program in a minute. Next slide. As we've worked with the city, HART, and DOT over the last couple of years, we've developed this preliminary funding allocation. So of the $237 million, we would look to get the maximum amount under the federal Small Starts program, which would be $99.9 million. They have a $100 million cap. That's the federal share would be 42% of the total. The remaining 58% will be split between DOT New Starts program, which is 50% of the non-federal share, $68.9 million, and split between HART surtax, city surtax, and other city funding for the remaining. So the state and local share is an even split between the state's New Starts program and local sources, and then that's subdivided between HART surtax, city surtax, and other cities. We recognize, as Vic has said, that this whole plan is contingent on the surtax funding to be available for the project. And if that money is not available, we would have to go back to the drawing board to reconstruct the financial plan based on other available sources or a potential future source for surtax, which people have talked about as a plan B, but that's what we'd be looking at doing. So there's a potential pause coming up in the project, but we believe it's important to continue to move forward through the FTA process so we can stay in the queue for funding, and if we have to delay, we can make that decision once we get resolution on the surtax funding availability. Next slide, please. So we're deep in the process of project development. We've been accepted into the FTA Small Starts project development program. The FTA coordination has been ongoing. The preferred extension alternative has been selected. Coordination with related projects continues. We've initiated the NEPA 106 review process, look at environmental impacts. And the 30% design scoping is underway with the city, with the notion that process will kick off in the fall. So the next key milestone, and this is the focus of the discussion today, is around the ratings request at FTA, which is due August 28th, 2020. We have to submit documentation for project finances, project costs, and land use, economic development, and ridership, and that gets packaged into a series of forms that FTA provides to us, and we submit that, and FTA looks at it through the fall, and so I'll let Stephanie elaborate on that process, but this is one step in that multi-year FTA process, and we're looking for the board's approval to submit the ratings request package, not committing to the full project at this point, but just submitting the ratings request package the end of the month. Next slide, please. And I'll turn this over to Stephanie McVeigh, who's one of HDR's leads in the FTA coordination process through project development efforts like this.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Next slide, please. I'd like to spend a few minutes to review FTA's Small Starts program. Small Starts is one of several funding programs within the Capital Investment Grant Program umbrella. Small Starts programs are defined by having a capital cost of no more than $300 million and seeking less than $100 million in federal CIG funding. The Small Starts process, as Steve alluded to, has one phase, essentially. We are in the project development phase. To get there, we sent in a letter requesting entry into project development last year. Were accepted, and throughout the project development phase, a number of activities will happen. On the evaluation and rating side, there is one submittal ahead of applying for the ultimate grant agreement. This is a multi-year process, and throughout both the rating request and after the rating request in the preparation of readiness documents and justifying the technical, legal, and financial capacity of the project and project team to the FTA, that will result then in a small start grant agreement or the application to a grant agreement. One key note is in recent years, the small start project development process has seen longer time periods than over the previous 10 to 15 years. A number of reasons for this have come up, and in fact, the Government Accountability Office released a report just about 3 weeks ago kind of documenting the experience of small start project sponsors and the reason to some of these delays. It should be noted that about 2/3 of small start project sponsors, so of which the City of Tampa is the official project sponsor, with project partners, of course, being HART and FDOT. The small starts project sponsors who experienced delays, only about 1/3 of those did, and the majority of those happened in the environmental evaluation process. And then a smaller number experienced delays as they moved toward the grant agreement process. And so some of the items to keep in mind as we're progressing both through environmental review and moving toward the grant agreement is ensuring that there's good review, transparency, and documentation on both sides, given by the FTA and provided to them. Next slide, please. This is the small start timeline. So as we've mentioned, there's a number of ongoing activities. This has been going for the last couple of years and will continue throughout the project development process. We're obviously at the point to request a evaluation and rating of the project. A number of considerations go into that rating request. There's significant work done to estimate the ridership and to forecast the ridership for the project, and also to establish the capital and operating costs, to analyze land use and economic development policies, and then establish a 20-year financial plan for the project. And then once this evaluation and rating package is submitted within the month, the next step will be to prepare, at least on the CIG side, to prepare the readiness documents. So there are a number of management plans, sub-plans, and agreements, and specifically governance agreements, that are key to informing the decision and moving the project through the small starts process. Next slide, please. So during the ratings request, the need for the project to be rated is a federal requirement. It's in statute. The project will be rated once ahead of requesting a grant agreement, and then rated a second time at the time of the grant agreement evaluation. The rating request is made up of two key components, each which are equally weighted. The project justification criteria is a set of 6 criteria, 3 of which are heavily based on ridership, and then the other 3 are, land use and economic development and environmental benefits. The second half of the rating is a local financial commitment. This establishes the commitment of funding, both operating and capital, the reasonableness of the assumed sources of funding. And the project must receive a medium rating, and so the FTA takes each of the criteria and rates them on a 5-point scale. The project justification criteria, each of the 6 are equally weighted. The local financial commitment, there are 3, and they're weighted differently, the 25%, 25%, 50%. Each of those combined need to receive a medium in order for the project to be recommended for funding. If, however, we submit a ratings request and the project does not receive or achieve a medium rating for each of those 2 components, this does not kill the project. It does not boot it out of the small starts development pipeline. It simply goes back to the drawing board for refinement. And in fact, Once the rating request is submitted to the FTA, there's often questions and a number of back and forth conversations throughout the fall as the FTA evaluates the ratings package. And so once the ratings package has been evaluated, those are generally completed by the end of November, early December. The recommendations, then the FTA creates a list of recommendations that are submitted to the annual funding report, or annual report, excuse me, and then those may be recommended for funding in the President's budget. So that gets to why now. There's a number of considerations, both in the regional level and then also federally. Regionally, the project is obviously going to be competing for FDOT New Starts funding, and this is a limited pot of funding. And so in order to hold our place in line, so to speak, and to kind of get into that pipeline as well, this submittal to the FTA is critical. Additionally, on the federal level, the Surface Transportation Authorization Bill is set to expire September 30th. This drives both the funding level and also the evaluation process for small starts. What we're hearing for early proposals for the next reauthorization is that potentially small start funding levels could increase. And just the effect on the current number of projects in the capital investment grant pipeline could mean that some new starts projects with some larger projects are now eligible for small starts funding. And so that increase in competition, both from existing pipeline and also what would potentially be, new projects coming into the pipeline, it would behoove the project to be able to be rated and evaluated at this point, be in the pipeline and in line for a potential allocation next year, and then also, furthering down or, maintaining that progress into the Small Starts program. Next slide, please. So the next phase of work, once the evaluation and ratings package is submitted, does begin the preparation of the readiness documents, and this is a significant process that does take years potentially to prepare and to be approved by the FTA and its oversight contractors. There are three components to the readiness reviews and documents that the FTA will evaluate: legal, financial, and technical capacity. And so legal capacity is largely governed by the governance documents and the third-party agreements establishing the roles and responsibilities. Financial capacity is for the commitment of funds. And so while funding is not required to be committed at the time of submitting a ratings and evaluation package, it is required to be, all non-federal monies are required to be committed at the time of applying for a grant agreement. The technical capacity, a very key component of this is the organizational structure of the project team. And so this includes both the city and HART, its consultant staff. One of the first responsibilities of FTA's project management oversight consultant would be is to evaluate and understand the structure of the project team, who will be responsible for the design phase, construction, operation, and management. The keys would be how safety and quality personnel report. So they will look heavily at your organizational charts, the reporting structure, and the process to complete the construction of the project. Next slide, please. And so, our next steps include the preparation of those readiness documents and also the governance agreements, which Jeff will touch more on in just a minute. And then concurrently, we are finishing the final design and engineering of the project, as well as achieving environmental clearance. And the final step, of course, is the commitment of local funds. So with that, I will turn it over to Jeff.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Stephanie. This is Jeff Booth, Infra Strategies, and could you go to the next slide, please? And after that, please. Okay, Stephanie mentioned, as Victor mentioned earlier in the presentation, the city and HART are in the process of developing a memorandum of understanding that will serve as the basis for a discussion between council and others about the rules and responsibilities for the city and HART going forward. And it will outline sort of project governance, project delivery, project management. And as it stands right now, the city is the lead for the FTA project submission, as you heard in the presentation made by Stephanie and by Steve and by Vic. HART is the designated grant recipient, which means that HART will be the recipient of federal dollars once there is a grant agreement. In order to move the project forward, the FTA will need to see an organizational chart and the agreements that identify who is accountable for each phase and each element of the project. Next. In addition, FTA requires that a 20-year financial plan for capital operations and maintenance be prepared. And this includes a cash flow analysis to document how each of the parties' financial capacity and the sources that will be utilized. And as was mentioned earlier by Steve, the plan currently assumes the 2018 sales tax is the primary source of those funds. More importantly, the FDOT New Starts program commitment is also predicated on the existence of those funds. And so therefore, in order to meet the FTA requirement to be able to receive a medium rating for the financial plan and to demonstrate that the monies are committed on the part of the FDOT commitment, we will need to see that those local source tax is upheld. If it's not, then the FDOT cannot make that commitment. So it's important to understand that if, in fact, there isn't the local match to support the FDOT financial commitment. Next, please. So what does it mean in the eyes of FTA for funds to be committed? What it means is that there are no further approvals required, legislative or referendum-wise, to make the monies available. So no additional action has to be taken. Monies need to be formally programmed in the Metropolitan Planning Organization's Transportation Improvement Program or any other related documents, but they just need to be demonstrated that they are available and that nothing else has to happen in order for them to be available to the project. And so examples of that are dedicated or approved tax revenues, the state capital grants such as the FDOT New Starts commitment, cash reserves that have been made available by the city or HART for the project, or additional debt capacity that requires no further commitment to make monies available once there is a grant agreement. So those are just some examples. Next. So what is the project management plan? This is a document that is prepared that FTA requires every project sponsor to prepare. And what it does is it demonstrates sort of the organizational structure to design and build and operate the project. It captures roles and responsibilities and how they are allocated between the city and HART going forward. And they will review the organizational chart to make sure that every key position is filled. I've given you an example of one on the right. And they'll assess also the capacities and capabilities of each of the persons who are overseeing the functions of the project to determine their prior capacity or their demonstrated ability to perform those roles. And so they will look at that. And so next, please. And so this is laid out in a document that the FTA has put together called the Project and Construction Management Guidelines. And that's a formal document that FTA uses that should be used by the city and HART and the project management oversight consultant to sort of review the project financial plan, to define the requirements for what it means for resource allocation, project activities, management of assets, monitoring progress, making adjustments as necessary, and making sure the timely decisions are made to keep the project moving forward. I think it's a key issue to keep in mind in my prior project experience is that FTA expects the city and HART to have internal capacity to perform those roles. They don't want either party to rely on seconded staff or outside consultants, so they will expect you to have internal capacity to perform many of those functions to oversee the project management. So that's something to keep keeping in mind as the project goes forward. So just the next slide is sort of a summary of some of the key issues that should be reflected in the governance documents. Next slide, please. The next slide anyway. So the next slide is just, these are sort of an overview of some of the key issues in terms of, the key ones are ownership of assets and really looking at the current Streetcar governance agreement to see who will own the assets that are currently in place, who will own the assets going forward, who will have responsibility to ensure that there's continuing effective control of real property use for the project. Utility road location is often a critical issue and probably an early action item as the project moves forward. As we talked about before, cost responsibility, and then also bonding capacity in terms of typically in early project construction, you have to let bonds or finance the early project construction to let the early contracts in and use the monies coming in to repay the debt or repay the bonds going forward. So whose bonding capacity will be used to help finance early project construction, and there also need to be various policy-making committees determine issues such as operations, failures, and other key issues between the city and HART, so we have agreement as to how the project will be operated and how decisions are made that will be critical to the project. With that, let me turn it over to Linda.
Thanks, Jeff. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Linda Crescentini, Director of the Project Management Office. So let's look at the next slide, please. Next slide. Let's look at the timeline and summarize what we heard today. So the items that were recently completed, the spring of 2020, was the project development was complete, as well as the design and engineering procurement by the City of Tampa. So where do we go from here? Today, we are looking for the small starts rating request, as you heard, is to be submitted by the end of this month, and we would like to begin the 30% design and engineering. Our next steps, our important steps after today, would be to really focus on that governance and financial commitments, as well as getting all the documents that we need ready for the small starts grant agreement. A future years out is obviously the modernization, extension, and construction, as well as the vehicle procurement and the start of service. Next, please. So with that, we're requesting board action today. We're requesting that the board approves the letter of endorsement, authorize the interim chief executive officer to sign a letter of endorsement which supports submission of the project justification materials to FTA for the purpose of evaluating and rating this project. So thank you, and I'll open it up for any questions.
Thank you very much. A very meaty presentation, and I know you've been working on this a long time and discussing this with board members as well. At this point, I will open up the floor for a board discussion, and we have Commissioner Overman. You are recognized.
I'm sorry, that was from before. I apologize.
Thank you. Commissioner Kemp, you're next.
Thank you. Obviously, there's a lot more to be determined about this project, and it is good to hear so much and understand so much of it going forward. I think it's exciting that for the first time in decades, we're looking at a project that we can invest in, a transit project that we can invest in. And this is one of the, most important areas in the entire region, actually, for transit. And this is both, in my mind, people-moving project, as was said, 100,000 jobs and people living in that area, and probably going to be increasing. It's also, goes by our convention center, our hotels. It's also a tourism project. I'm excited about moving this forward. I would like to move approval of us with the letter to move with the FTA and keep going forward on this project. I'll also just say for now, as we sort through the many issues moving forward, I really think that in terms of operations, we also need to look at a permanent source, I think, of contribution of our tourism tax dollars. It's kind of hard to talk about now when there's coronavirus, when there's no tourism tax dollars, when all kinds of things are happening, but I do have a lot of hope for the future, and I think we're going to be in a position once again in the future. So I just want to put forward that idea at this point, because I think that would be an important contribution down the road to our continued operating costs as one of the contributing sources. But I'll, again, move this motion forward to approve that letter for the FTA.
Thank you. And before I recognize other speakers, do we have a second to the motion on the floor?
Schiffler, second.
All right. Motion by Commissioner Kemp, seconded by Councilman Schiffler. And our next board member is Director Mechanic. You're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I will certainly be supporting the motion, and I think that was an excellent presentation. I've been through a lot of these, and I don't think I've ever heard it so clearly explained as it was this morning, and I thank all of you for doing that. I have a couple of questions. The O&M cost, the estimate, does, and I have two or three questions actually. The O&M cost of estimated at $8 million, does that include the existing streetcar O&M, or is that $8 million above the current operating costs?
Thank you, board member, for that. Yes, it includes the current alignment as well as the extension, the $8 million, and we envision that cost would be split again if the surtax is up.
Okay. Another question, and I don't expect an answer today, but I guess I'm just raising the issue. I think the single most costly expense in operating the streetcar today is the insurance for crossing the CSX railroad. The proposed alignment would add 2 crossings to CSX tracks, and I would just like to know what consideration you're giving for that and the possibility of getting that cost reduced through either discussions with CSX or some other legal mechanism to address that.
Sure. This is Vic Bide again. Again, thank you for the question. The viability of operating both current or future alignments of the streetcar are critical. We've started conversations with local stakeholders to see how we can augment funding to Commissioner Kemp's point to make sure that we can support the current streetcar. As far as the future alignment, I had mentioned that the complete future alignment for this project crosses CSX tracks twice. Once around Ybor, which is the existing crossing, and the other is at Polk. We have done preliminary work internally as the city to verify that the Polk CSX line is actually owned by the city. And so this may actually become an opportunity to manage that insurance cost overall favorably and potentially very favorably. Again, this is a preliminary exploration, but we have an opportunity. We've verified ownership, so we're optimistic about that aspect. But it does remain critical.
Thank you. One last question, Madam Chairman, if I could.
Go ahead.
And this is for, I think, Jeff, the governance agreement and the MOU, I'm not sure I understand that there are 2 different things, but apparently there are. But what are the deadlines for both of those items? And leave it at that. What are the deadlines for those items?
Thank you, Commissioner. So the first part of your question would be that the MOU is sort of the predicate to putting together the governance agreement. So it's just the initial document that will be used between the city and HART to identify the issues that must be tackled, that ultimately will be reflected in the governance agreement itself. So please, they're not 2 different things. It's just one leads to the other. So the MOU just begins the conversation, but it ultimately will be concluded in the governance agreement. The timing of that governance agreement is basically that it's required before we're going to have an approved project management plan, which is also required before FTA will then begin the conversation to give the project a grant agreement. So I think the issue then is the more quickly we move through those issues that are reflected in the governance agreement and the overall project management plan will then dictate when FTA will consider the project ready to get a grant agreement. So at this point, once we're in the president's budget, then the timing is kind of up to us to begin to work on those documents with the goal, if the goal is to get in and get a grant agreement in fiscal year 22 that starts October 1st of next year, then if we just count back how long it takes FTA to approve a project once you have an approved project management plan, you have an approved grant agreement, is about 4 to 6 months. So if we looked and say, let's say our target date is spring of 22, then we need to have that document completed by the fall or early winter of next year. So we're sort of in control of the next step in terms of how quickly we move forward with resolving those issues in the governance agreement. And obviously, then that's predicated on having an upheld sales tax, moving the project forward. But those things are within our control. But just to conclude by saying that the governance agreement is really up to the city and the HART to wrestle those issues to the ground and to get agreement between the parties to be able to move the project forward.
Okay, Jeff, thank you. That answers my question.
Thank you.
I have nothing else.
And we have quite a few more directors in the queue, so if everyone could help move as quickly as possible. And I'll ask another time to make sure your phone or your computer is muted when you're not online. We are getting a little bit of ambient noise. Next is Director Councilman Vieira. You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that sincerely. No, just wanted to put forth my strong support of this initiative. It was a great presentation. I strongly support this and hope we can continue to move forward with an aggressive eye on this project. We all know of the big threat of the AFT lawsuit. AFT is about our wants, not our needs, and this project certainly shows that. We don't have a decision yet, obviously, from the Florida Supreme Court, and when we do, we can reassess at that point. But even if there is an adverse decision, there's potentially many, many options available after that. And again, that's a big if. I strongly support this. I thank Commissioner Kemp for making the motion. We can't declare defeat and go from a home run or a grand slam with AFT to not even stepping up to the plate. And I think that going forward allows us to step up to the plate. So I just wanted to voice my very, very strong support. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Councilman Schisler, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I, too, support the resolution. I do think that it's critical for the area moving forward, but I do have some concerns primarily. What is HART spending on this project in the interim while it's moving forward? And in the event that the Supreme Court strikes down the law, strikes down the referendum, we could be potentially looking at a 2 to 3 year delay in this going forward. And the funds to manage that and to keep it going are going to be coming out of current operations, which are stretched razor thin as it is. So I'm just curious, and just everybody be aware that this is something that could financially bite us if we're not careful. I support it, but we just need to watch the pennies, nickels, and dimes, and then everything else is taken care of. So I just curious, what is the annual expense for this internally to HART? And unless it's an ongoing pre-approved funding issue that we did some time ago, and then after 2 years to keep this going, how much is it going to cost us until we start seeing action from the federal level? I'll stop there.
So, Director, this is Vic Bide. I'll try and answer that question, but of course, it was about HART's contribution. So, where we are in the process today, we've used city funding to bring us to this process, of course, with strong time and support from HART as well. So, definitely been a partnership in that sense. As far as the capital dollars are concerned, again, predicated on the fact that, not the fact, but the hope, predicated on the surtax, a bulk of the local, which is non-DOT and non-FTA funding for capital, was to come from HART. It's about $58 million. And again, that's the capital portion. The operating portion is about $8 million. And the previous discussions had been a potential 50-50 split. But again, that is not set in stone. That is one of the concerns in terms of budget that HART has had. And we recognize these difficult times, revenue projections, all of that. And that's something we're committed to working with HART on and arrive at a place that everyone's comfortable with.
Thank you. Ms. Stiglitz, do you have any comments about addressing Councilman Schisler's questions or otherwise about HART's role in the funding of this project as we're moving through these steps?
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair. Cindy Stiglitz, for the record, interim CFO for HART. Up to this point, HART has not contributed financially to any of the PD&E efforts. We have contributed staff time, and we are going to be looking for some funding in FY21 to continue the advisory services of InfraStrategies, helping us guide through the governance process. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got just a couple more speakers. Director Harden, you're recognized. Director Harden?
Hey, I'm sorry. Director Mechanic glossed over several of the issues I had. I'm happy to hear that we followed through with the intel that the city likely owned the Polk Street crossings. Have you also pursued the concept of a change in ownership from a private not-for-profit to allow the streetcar to benefit from sovereign immunity for the remaining crossing, or do you believe that there'll be some reverse leverage with the Polk crossings to be able to manage that? As somebody who sits on the streetcar board itself, I mean, obviously that's a huge issue and has been from the inception. The majority of the original endowment that was raised for the streetcar has all been expended on this insurance, and it's just certainly an issue that's kind of threshold, needs to get resolved so that this O&M can hold. And then additionally, at a high level, I would like to know if you could describe the whole project. Like, what is the length of this whole modernized project? I see that we're talking about 1.3 miles, but it's really 2.6 or 2.7 miles of new track. And then, but the modernization portion of it, what are the modifications that are being made to the existing tracks back to the sheriff's office anymore and around to, hat tricks, and then this line item for the purchase of vehicles, $66 million. Just at a high level, what type of service, how many vehicles, what type of headway service would be allowed with that number of vehicles that can be purchased for $66 million? That's the extent of my questions for now.
Great. Thank you, Director Harden. So real quick, on the insurance question, it is a critical item. It does need to be addressed, but we do need more clarity on it as we move forward. So we're going to initiate discussions with CSX. We've already initiated discussions locally with stakeholders to understand what would be the best mechanism to provide viable operations in the future. However, I'd like to highlight that if we're at that juncture where that conversation is a problem, that'd be a great problem to have, because that means that we're well funded. On your question about alignment, yes, you're absolutely right. We're talking about route miles, so 1.3 new route miles, meaning the actual track is going to be 2.6 miles. Because the alignment is northbound along Florida as proposed and southbound along Tampa. As far as the existing tracks are concerned, the existing tracks will be modernized to accommodate new vehicles. There's also been consideration given to keep some of the historic elements and one or two cars available also. And again, a lot of that modernization of the existing facilities is broken into three parts. One is the track itself, be it turns or the type of vehicle. The other are stations to make sure that the entry and exit points are level, we're inclusive, they support ADA, and support brisk operations because it has more buses than, or more doors than buses, basically. So we can turn around fast and service. And then the third is to the Streetcar barn, which is city-owned, operated by HART under agreement as well. And those are some of the agreements that we're working with HART to get to a better place on. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Thank you. And Mayor Castor, you are next. You're recognized.
Okay. Thank you. The majority of the issues have been covered. I say thank you very, very much for the presentation, the team that has put this together, and also for everyone's support of this letter of endorsement. I hope that this is a unanimous decision because it is just a letter of endorsement, but it is the next step in an incredible project for our entire region. And there, we don't have a crystal ball and a crystal clear path forward. There are questions to be answered, and governance, funding, and some specific details of the plan. But this is an excellent start, an excellent team, and outstanding regional cooperation in this project. So I wholeheartedly endorse it, and thanks again to everyone for their efforts in this presentation.
Thank you. And Commissioner Miller, I think you're our last director to speak.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to ask the interim CEO a question again. Interim CFO. You mentioned that we would have to bring forth some funding next fiscal year. Am I correct? Is that what you said?
Yes, sir.
Would you explain why we would have to bring forth that funding and kind of give us an estimate of how much that funding would be?
As I will present to committee in August for adoption in September, we have, I believe it's approximately $120,000 for advisory services to help us guide through the governance portion, as well as provide us some insight into the full funding grant agreement process that Jeff alluded to earlier.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Great presentation, great discussion, very in-depth discussion by the board. Seeing no further discussion or requests for comments or questions by board members, I will ask again for everybody to mute their phones and call. We have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Kemp, seconded by Councilman Schisler, to approve the letter of endorsement. And would staff please take a roll call vote?
Yes, thank you. This is Danielle from HART. Please say yes or no after your name is called. Director Castor?
Yes.
Director Hardin?
Yes.
Director Kemp?
Yes.
Director Knight?
Yes.
Director Mechanic?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Director Overman?
Yes.
Director Schisler? Director Schisler? Chair Smith?
Yes.
Director Vieira?
Yes.
Director Williams?
Yes.
Director Schisler? The motion passes 10 to zip. Thank you.
All right. And thank you, everyone. That takes us to our next Fixed Guideway presentation of the morning, the Cross Bay Ferry, Public-Private Partnership Plan for permanent Tampa Bay ferry service. Board members, this item was presented to the Strategic Planning and External Relations Committee on February 17th. And then COVID happened, but here we are finally. That committee recommended unanimously to the Board of Directors, I'll read their motion, that the agency continue to work towards this very worthwhile project by continuing to work with the county to determine the best vehicle to move this project forward and to use HART facilities to the greatest extent possible given the limitation of financial resources. And so with that, I'll welcome Mr. Matt Miller, President of HMS Ferries, and Mr. Ed Taranchik, former County Commissioner and former HART Board member for 11 years. You are recognized and yes. Welcome. Yes.
Good morning, and thank you for including the Cross Bay Ferry as part of the agenda. Ed and I are excited to have the opportunity to update you on this important public-private partnership between Hillsborough County, HMS Ferries, and South Swell Development Corporation. Next slide. This important project is a mass transit option that other maritime communities, which are highlighted in red, have embraced for years. A mass transit option is commuter ferry service, which has a long, rich history of being safe, reliable, efficient, and environmentally sound. Next slide. There are many advantages to ferry service as part of the mass transit system. The right-of-way is free, it is congestion-proof, the customer experience is historically positive, it is a prove-it transit option during catastrophic events, including most recently COVID. During COVID-19, we've continued to provide the safest transit option possible to the communities we serve. Next slide. The design of the ferries allows for the safest mass transit option currently available. The vessels have open space on the decks, have large cabins, and we provide dedicated crew to keep the ferry disinfected. In New York, for example, the subway was shut down during the peak of their pandemic. However, our ferry service continued to operate without hesitation. Next slide. The Tampa Bay community has embraced the Cross Bay Ferry. As you can see, our ridership has increased from year to year, and this annual increase is for a seasonal limited service operation. The Tampa Bay community wants year-round ferry service. Next slide. And ferry service is great for business. A majority of the riders spent on average of $40 or more at their destination location. Next slide. The ferry is a good regional mobility option. Many of our passengers who are headed to either Tampa or St. Pete, even if the ferry did not exist, opted to take the ferry as opposed to driving. It's proven to take cars off of our roadways. Next slide. So here's the plan. First, provide commuter service from South County to MacDill Air Force Base. Second, provide night and weekend service to connect South County to St. Petersburg and downtown Tampa. Third, HMS will provide an approximate $100 million commitment to operate and maintain the service. And fourth, make use of free land provided by Mosaic for the terminal and access roads. It is simple and extremely effective plan. Next slide. But this plan has overwhelming public support. We have done continuous customer surveys about this project, and over 90% of the residents support the investment in this year-round service. Ed will now provide a quick overview of the history of this project. Next slide.
Thank you, Matt. Next slide. Thank you. This is Ed Taranchik, Policy and Legal Counsel for Cross Bay Ferry. Ferry planning actually was started by Hillsborough County in 2008 when it was successful in securing a federal congressional earmark. What followed was the county and the NPO studying all potential ferry routes and deciding that the highest route and highest priority option was from South County to McDill. The county and the NPO then did a follow-up feasibility study on that route. Next slide, please. In 2013, Hillsborough County issued a procurement for a public-private partnership for the South County McDill Air Force Base route. It contained a key provision that the operator cover all operating costs. HMS and Southwell Development Group responded. They and the county entered into a public-private partnership in 2014, which called for the county to fund the capital costs of the project, while HMS and Southwell would design, build, and then operate the project. The county has subsequently invested over $1.4 million to evaluate 15 different sites, undertake various ridership and customer surveys, environmental reviews, and develop concept plans. Next slide, please. In May of 2019, the County Commission voted to proceed with the next phase of the project that called for the design and environmental permitting of the system with a terminal located at Williams Park. At that point, Mosaic came forward and offered to donate land for a ferry terminal and access roadway at its Big Bend facility in lieu of the Williams Park site. The private partners in the county then agreed that the Big Bend site was the best option. The county spent an additional $75,000 in developing the concept plan for that, and the business plan was revised to focus the system at the Big Bend site. However, in August 2019, the County Commission, given that the AFT had passed, voted to move this project to HART because it believed that HART was better positioned to do it and had the funding to implement the project. That has brought us here. Next slide, please. Where we stand today is that the county's investment in the work of the private partners has positioned this ferry plan as an advanced, affordable, and fixed guideway project that can well serve and connect Hillsborough County's fastest growing region of South County, which now has remarkably, back to the days when I was the county commissioner, this wasn't the case, but they have 27% of the county's registered voters. It can connect them to major employment and entertainment destinations, with such destinations including McDill Air Force Base, downtown Tampa, and Ybor City, while taking thousands of cars off our roadways each day. Mr. Miller will now provide further details of what the current Cross Bay Ferry public-private ships plan is. Next slide, please.
I will finish by giving you a quick overview of the operating plan, which is the service, the boats, the docks, the terminal, and the budget. Next slide. This is a conceptual design of the ferry. It is similar to the ferries we designed and built for the New York City ferry system, and this plan calls for HMS to design, build, and operate 4 of these vessels. In the last several years, our team has designed and built more passenger vessels than any other shipbuilder in the U.S. Our capability to design and build ferries is unmatched and is why NYC Ferry has been so successful almost overnight. Next slide. The Big Bend site is perfect from an operational perspective. The land is donated, there is easy access for main traffic arteries, it's already a commercial facility, and it can easily be transformed into a world-class ferry terminal. Next slide. There is plenty of room for the current fleet of 4 vessels anticipated for the service, and there is room for expansion. The floating dock concept is low impact, low cost, and extremely efficient, and we use this concept at many of our locations. Next slide. The ops plan includes the popular weekend and weeknight service that we've been executing for years in the current Cross Bay Ferry service. This popular service will be provided year-round. During the weekday, we will offer MacDill commuter service during peak commuter hours. Next slide. And the foundation of this ops plan is, in fact, the commuter service, as a ferry will depart approximately every 15 minutes during peak commuter periods. This service will reduce the number of cars on the roadways in and around Tampa and provide safe, reliable, and efficient mass transit option for South County residents. And it will improve the commuter's quality of life. What once took 1 to 1.5 hours each way to commute now takes 30 minutes from door to door. Next slide. Now let me be clear, MacDill Air Force Base and the Department of Defense supports this project. This slide is a language directly from the U.S. Air Force and shows that this project is an officially adopted community partnership project of the United States Air Force. Next slide. This is a conceptual rendering of the terminal at MacDill Air Force Base. It allows for proper security screening for entry onto MacDill, and it is similar to what we use at the Vinoy Basin for Cross Bay Ferry and is nearly identical to what we use in our New York City ferry system. Next slide. This slide shows the location of the terminal at MacDill and highlights the proposed shuttle route that will transport passengers to their final destination at MacDill. Next slide. These are the number of MacDill employees by zip code that commute by car through Tampa to MacDill Air Force Base. Next slide. And this is how that traffic flow would change and improve as a result of the ferry commuter service. This is a service that is great for MacDill employees and great for the community because it takes so many commuters off the highways. Next slide. The federal transit subsidy for federal employees using mass transit also makes this a desirable commute option for MacDill employees. Over 85% of MacDill employees in South County said they would take the service with the federal transit subsidy. This saves them time, money, wear and tear on their car, and the frustration of being caught in traffic. Next slide. Here's our initial thoughts on what the fare schedule would look like. And for the MacDill commuter, the federal transit subsidy would cover their commuter fares. And the weekend and weeknight service fare structure are similar to the current fares we use at the Cross Bay Ferry currently. Next slide. And here's a quick overview of the costs of this project. Next slide. It is rare there is a transit option where the operator is willing to take the risk of operating without a subsidy. Next slide. HMS is willing to commit over approximately $100 million in operating costs over 20 years. We believe in this project, and the community believes in this project. Next slide. As you can see from this slide, this is a turnkey mass transit project for only $36 million. Next slide. An HMS commitment to this project is 3 times the initial capital cost. It is a rare long-term commitment and demonstration of our true partnership in this project. Next slide. Ed will now close with the proposed next steps.
Thank you, Matt. Next slide, please. An essential step to moving forward is to maintain the existing public-private partnership between the county and Southwell Development Group and HMS, which only the county can do. This is a highly qualified team that can do a turnkey project fast. And as Matt has just said, it's making an unprecedented and substantial operating commitment worth over $100 million. Members of the board, this would be the only transit project in the state of Florida that does not require an operating subsidy from either the state or local governments to operate. Next slide, please. As Matt mentioned, HMS is the pros from Dover's on this. They stood up the New York system, which included 5 routes, 29 vessels in just 3 years. And as Matt also indicated, this system continued to run over the last 6 months when other transit options weren't running. Next slide, please. As a background, where we stand in this project, as I indicated earlier, is that we are on the threshold of going to the second interim phase, which calls for the development of the project. Last summer, HMS South Sullivan County developed a detailed work plan, scope, and budget for what's needed next. We collectively determined that it would take approximately $2.4 million over the next 18 to 24 months to move this project to have it ready for construction. This would mean the environmental permits would be done. We would be 60 to 80% design. We would refine the operating plan and have firm capital cost estimates. Next slide, please. We know that the whole context of transit planning and transit funding is up in the air because of actions in the legal circle. We also appreciate that there's a unanimous recommendation by the Strategic Planning Committee to support the project. We are asked what we thought would be the way to move this project forward, and this slide represents a path forward. In light of the current funding and staffing capabilities of HART and the county, we believe that this is how, if the board decides to, you can keep this project on track as a pipeline project so that it is in the position to be implemented within 3 years. The first piece, of course, is to endorse this project as a premium priority fixed guideway project. I think the county commission wants to know what HART's perspective is on this, as does the community. Second, we recommend that the county continue and fund and oversee the next phase of project development. The county has greater resources than the financial resources than HART. It knows the project. It started the project. The major capital and infrastructure investment will be made in the unincorporated county. The county knows how to plan and permit things like roads, parking lots, stormwater ponds, and administrative buildings. Indeed, the scope of the Capital Works program for fixed infrastructure is pretty much similar to building a small to medium park, which the county does year in and year out. Third, though, it is important for HART to continue to provide limited staff input during the planning phase. This is not consultants, it's just HART providing specifications about how to design a terminal to receive buses, what that bus system might look like as HART develops independently as part of its normal work plan, what its short-range and long-range transit plans are. And finally, given the Board of County Commissioners' awareness that HART might have, again, a dedicated funding source, I think it's important for the HART Board to indicate to the county that upon approval of a permanent source of transit funding, that the HART Board would be in the position to consider covering the local share of the capital cost project, plus assuming operational oversight of this project. But I want to emphasize here, there is no request for HART to subsidize nor from the state of Florida to subsidize the operation of this proposed system. In this regard, this transit project is the only transit project in the entire United States of which I have been familiar in the last 30 years, where you have a dedicated source of operating revenue coming from a private sector source. Mr. Miller and I are ready and available to take any questions the board might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. And we will open the floor for board discussion, starting with Commissioner Kemp.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is an exciting morning because I just to see both the streetcar and to see this, both very feasible, real projects that we could put on the ground here in Hillsborough County. One serving kind of the downtown area and the other serving a huge part of the county that gets very little service at all in terms of transit. So this is very exciting to me. I have a couple questions, but I'll start by making the motion to support the Cross Bay Ferry Partner Project as a priority premium fixed guideway project, to recommend to Hillsborough County, or recommend that Hillsborough County proceed with and fund the next project phase, including planning, design, and environmental permitting, that HART commits to provide input and staff technical assistance during the planning, design, and environmental permitting phase of the partnership project, including evaluation and the development of bus connections, so important right there off Big Bend Road. And finally, that HART is willing to consider assumption of the project oversight and funding at later stages, contingent upon securing new transit funding sources. So that's first my motion.
Thank you. So we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Kemp. Is there a second?
Schiffler, second.
Thank you. Councilman Schiffler.
I had a couple of questions. Oh, sorry.
How about I come back to you after Commissioner Kemp, after the other directors? Would that suit you, or you want to go now?
I'll just have I just have one overview. I was just curious because I've been so excited about and watched for several years as New York developed their ferry system. And I know HMS is kind of a premier ferry service provider, and I know it's grown incredibly there. I didn't know how it was doing in times of coronavirus, but it made sense to me that it could be operating, and I just wondered if Mr. Miller could talk a little bit about, for us, it's so exciting that we have water here and that we can do something that other places cannot do. If Mr. Miller could talk to us a little bit about what's going on in New York with the ferry system.
Yeah, well, thank you, Commissioner. As I mentioned in our project, all of our transit sites that we operate have continued to operate during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's especially true in New York City, where other parts of their mass transit system had to be taken out of service to disinfect and get them ready for the precautions that needed to be taken. Our service in New York City did not skip a beat. We were able to quickly, make accommodations on board the vessel for social distancing and take all the other precautions with masks and increased sanitation. And our service continued. We did see a drop in ridership, obviously, because of the stay-at-home orders. But for the essential workers, we provided them an option to get from Brooklyn to downtown, and that's especially true when the subway was taken out of service for a bit in New York City. So it is a proven method of mass transit during and immediately after a catastrophic event.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kemp, I didn't mean to cut you off. Feel free to ask.
Oh, no, that's okay. I'm fine with having others ask. I just wanted to ask about that. Thanks.
Thank you. And Commissioner Miller, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question is, when the Board of County Commissioners voted to send this project over to HART, was both of these projects connected, or was it just the McDeal portion that was sent over to HART? I don't remember this connection from Tampa to St. Petersburg being a part of that. I thought it was a connection from Tampa to McDeal, and now we're combining both of them. Am I correct?
Mr. Tranchik, perhaps you can answer that.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Am I on?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Commissioner Miller. Both projects were always together. When the project was initially developed, the MacDill piece was going to have an occasional evening service. You may not recall, but in April of 2017, the County Commission unanimously approved a motion made by Commissioner Hagan directing that the project be increased to include both the inner city piece as well as the MacDill piece. So the plan that was submitted on April of 2019 included both. We've called it Cross Bay Ferry consistent with the branding of the very successful evening service. In July, the plan changed a bit to go from Williams Park as the terminal to Big Bend. From a mileage perspective, approximately half of the miles traveled by ferries under this plan will be inner city service, and half of the miles are traveled are going to be the MacDill. So, to be succinct, since April of 2019, when our business plan was submitted, it was both. And I get that there's some confusion about that because we did the inner city piece called Cross Bay, and that was going on in the background. We had the MacDill thing. But no, the two projects are connected, and as Mr. Miller indicated, the core of the project is the MacDill because it's got such a big ridership base in the federal transit voucher, and the two pieces fit together. The vessels, 4 vessels will operate back and forth during the weekday, and then they turn around and operate in the evening. So what is, again, extraordinary about this is unlike most transit projects where you get high transit use, maybe 5 or 6 hours a day, you're going to have vessels being used 7 days a week, 16 to 18 hours a day, carrying quite a number of people. But I appreciate that, people may not have understood all that.
Thanks.
Sure. Follow-up matter. But the portion from Tampa to St. Petersburg has been funded by some governmental entities, if I'm not mistaken, Hillsborough County, City of Tampa, City of St. Petersburg, and Pinellas County. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. That is a regional project, and in this budget, approximately $20 million are related to facility development in unincorporated Hillsborough County and MacDill. The ferry element is $16 million, and we have had discussions with people, the mayor in St. Petersburg and Pinellas County, and they understand and have represented to us is that it would be appropriate for them to have a fair share cost of the vessels because the vessels are going back and forth, kind of like they're doing now. Whereas the facilities development, the City of Tampa has a downtown dock. St. Petersburg just invested $70 million in the pier. So the capital side of this, because it's in Hillsborough County, is appropriate to be shared between county and the state, and while the vessels would be shared by probably all jurisdictions. That's to be worked out in the next phase, Commissioner.
Follow up, Madam Chair. You said that the Air Force was in support of this project from Tampa to MacDill. Has the Department of Defense approved this?
Well, it depends what you mean by approved it. This is an officially approved Department of Defense community partnership project. They have given, the slide that you saw before was developed by MacDill, given the MacDill Command, given to the United States Air Force. The United States Air Force submitted it to the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense has a nationwide community partnership program where they review submitted projects, and the Department of Defense has approved this as an official DoD community partnership project. There are 5 there. However, the next step is to go forward to secure a lease, but that requires doing an environmental assessment and environmental studies, and that is in fact, if you look at the prior, I think 2 slides back, that is part of the scope of work. Also, in June of 2019, our team had a meeting with about 20 people down at MacDill, including representatives of the command and, well, everyone from the base was there, and we all agreed and outlined the process. We also sent a memo to MacDill outlining where the project stood to make sure our understandings of what was in the project confirmed with their environmental staff, legal staff, and command staff, and they got back to us in writing and said, yes, it is consistent. So what we're representing to you is consistent with the approved, adopted Department of Defense Community Partnership Project.
Now, you're also recommending that you recommended Hillsborough County proceed with the funds, the next project phase, including planning, design, environmental permitting, and you want the county now to ante up $2.4 million in addition to the cost of the monies that we spent earlier. And so what you're asking to go back to county now and ask for $2.4 million?
Well, I think the recommendation is that HART does not have the money, clearly. And if anyone might have the money, it's Hillsborough County.
Well, Hillsborough County sent this project over to HART.
Well, I think that's the discussion today. Point two of the recommendation is not recommending a hard endorsement of that number. All we're stating is that is the number and scope that we worked out as what the next steps are. Whether the county pursues it or not is going to be up to you, Commissioner, and other members. But I think the discussion today clearly is HART's not in a position to prosecute this project nor the Streetcar project, and it's up to the local governments to decide whether or not they want to invest in the next phase. So we're not making...
What's the total cost of this project?
$36 million, with potential $2 million reduction because of some capital cost savings that we've identified.
So the price went down. Am I correct? The last time we were held in front of Hillsborough County, I thought it was something like the price of about $60 million. Now it's $36 million.
No, sir. This is the number that was, the capital cost number was vetted by the county consultants, and I think some of your colleagues suggested the cost would escalate. You have, as on this team, Mr. Matt Miller, they have done a turnkey development of the largest ferry system in the United States of America, did it in 3 years, stood up 5 lines with 29 vessels. Their team has vetted this, our team has vetted this, and the number is $36 million. I don't know where you come up with, anyone can come up with a number different than that, given the amount of county consultant, county staff, and private sector review of these numbers.
Well, as you know, I'm not going to be supporting the motion. Number one, Hillsborough County does not have $2.4 million. We just had our budget meeting recently, and the commissioners on here know that we do not have $2.4 million. Neither does HART have $2.4 million. Number two, your answer about DOD, Department of Defense, to me, I don't think was correct. I think it's kind of shaky. But I'm done. I'm not going to be supporting the motion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Schisler, your hand is raised. You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam. Good presentation. My second was for discussion purpose, because my concern was item number 2 in the list. HART recommends that a county cough up $2.4 million, and I figured that we had 4 county commissioners sitting here. I wondered what the appetite was for the county commission to pony up for the $2.4 million. And at this point, I'm just not sure whether they're willing to do that or not. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money, and it's when we don't have, and if the EOCC doesn't have it, then I think this thing is essentially dead. It's a great project. I think if we did it, and I think with the proper marketing, the South County to downtown part of it will be, very interesting proposition for everybody. But we can't go any further without 2.4 for the county. So I'm kind of on hold till I see what the county's willing to do. That's all.
Thank you, Councilman Schisler. And I believe the motion is to request this, then the county can make their decision on their side, just like we've done kind of with the previous item. Mr. Mechanic, Director Mechanic, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I just want to make a statement here about my prior role. Over 2 years ago, I represented HMS in connection with the getting an approval for an alternative site for the ferry in downtown Tampa. I previously disclosed this and asked General Counsel, and I believe he's advised that there is no voting conflict. I'd like him to confirm that. There is no attorney-client relationship with HMS today, and none of the actions we're talking about today relate to what work I did with them over 2 years ago. Mr. Smith, could you... I do have a couple of questions, Madam Chairman, but I'd like to just get that clarified for the record.
Thank you. Counsel Smith, Mr. Smith.
Yes, ma'am.
Has joined the meeting.
Mr. Mechanic and I have had that conversation. He is correct. He does not have a voting conflict, and in fact is required to vote.
Thank you. Mr. Mechanic, you have the floor.
Yes. Regarding item number 3, where HMS is asking for HART to provide input and technical assistance, what do we have an estimate of what that cost would be? And I'm going to ask either HART staff or HMS or both.
That is somebody's phone.
Has left the meeting.
Chairman Smith, this is Ed Tarancha.
Yes, Mr. Tarancha, I think you can answer that question.
Yes, Mr. Mechanic, it is neither HMS nor the county can give us input to what the transit service might look like coming out of Hillsborough County, South County, not in the types of buses, the number of buses. So it should be, it should really be in-kind assistance. That's not, it's something that HART would know and develop in the course of what they're doing in developing their plans. We just want to make sure that whatever we do fits hand in glove with what HART's doing. So it's saying that HART will provide technical input on these design issues, but not do the designs. We just need the agency to say, here's how many buses are coming in or might come in, here's what you have to plan for, and that kind of professional assistance which they're uniquely qualified for. At least that's the only thing that we are contemplating.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to offer what is hopefully considered a friendly amendment to the motion. In deference to the comments by Commissioner Miller, I think item 2, as presented to us, says HART recommends Hillsborough County proceed with and fund the next project phase at an estimated cost of $2.4 million. I would offer an amendment that would slightly change the wording to be similar to item 4, to say HART recommends Hillsborough County consider proceeding with. I'm just not comfortable with us batting the ball back to the county, given respect to the comments made by Commissioner Miller. I think all we could do is recommend that the county consider it, not that they do it. And maybe that's a fine semantical point, but I'd like to make that as an amendment to the motion.
Thank you. So we have an amendment to the motion to slightly word it as Director Mechanic suggests. Do we have a second to that?
I'll second that.
All right. Commissioner Kemp, it's your motion. Would you prefer to withdraw your motion and restate it this way?
Yes, I'll do that. I'll withdraw my motion and restate it with that in that language.
All right. And then do we have a second to this motion?
Point of parliamentary procedure, Madam Chair. Point of parliamentary procedure.
Yes, Commissioner.
You had an amendment. You had an amendment that was seconded. You're going to have to withdraw the amendment first, and then have Commissioner Kemp withdraw her motion.
Thank you very much. I very much respect your experience in this regard, Commissioner Miller. So, first of all, we will ask Director Mechanic if he would withdraw his amendment in order to proceed with a simple motion.
Yes, Madam Chairman, I'll withdraw the amendment.
Thank you. And back to Commissioner Kemp, who has withdrawn her motion and would restate it with the language as suggested by Director Mechanic.
Yes, I will.
And do we have a second to that?
Harden, second.
Thank you. All right. Back to a motion slightly reworded by Commissioner Kemp, seconded by Director Harden. Director Mechanic, are you finished?
Yes, I am, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Next is Commissioner Overman. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. This is challenging because I absolutely do support this project. I recognize where we basically lobbed it, where the Board of County Commission lobbed it over to HART to address. And I also recognize that we're, given where we are financially with so much uncertainty associated with COVID, getting a commitment from the county, financial commitment from the county at this point does seem very limited in possibility, not only for next year, but going forward. However, that being said, I wholeheartedly support figuring out a way that we can move forward on this project. We have folks in South County that are desperately looking for alternatives. Assuming we do continue workforce and strong workforce on the military base, it is going to be very important that we provide some relief to those that are traveling from South County. And this is one of the most efficient ways to do so. So I hope that we will continue to support this project. I will continue to support this project. I don't know how we'll find the funds to do it, given the limited resources the county is planning. But that being said, any way that we can continue with this motion that allows us to find creative ways to get the $2.4 million or whatever dollar we need, I think it would be important to consider working very hard to make that happen. It makes a difference to our communities, and it makes a difference to our relationship with the military base and its support of the employees, one of the largest employers in Hillsborough County, to be able to get to work efficiently and address their quality of life. So I will support the motion and look forward to working with all of the partners to try and find ways that we can move forward with the funding wherever we can find it. So thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you. And Director Harden, you're recognized. Director Harden? Director Harden, are you on mute?
Hey, there you go. Sorry about that.
That's right.
So thank you. I wanted to express support for this. As somebody who lived at the 6,000 block of South Bayshore for 12 years, I can tell you that, it's a pretty inefficient commute from Bloomingdale. I was trying to quickly go through some of our past board documents from HART and, quickly note that right now HART is currently running the 24LX, the 25LX, the 360LX, and among others. And I believe that those aggregate at somewhere around 8,000 trips a month. And my recollection is some of those are some of our more expensive routes, pretty highly subsidized routes. And of course, important. These are great jobs, and we're fortunate to have CENTCOM and SOCOM at MacDill. I think this is an important project. I do think that sending it back to the county for consideration, obviously, y'all have the big shoulders here, and maybe the money isn't there for it, but I do support sending it back for further deliberations at the county. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no further hands raised. I will make a few remarks myself before we vote. I have a long history supporting this project enthusiastically. 6 years ago, we kicked off bringing a ferry to our county, and I spoke at that meeting on behalf of the South County communities who, as former Commissioner Ed Tranchik pointed out, are 27% of the votes in Hillsborough County. But more importantly, they are at least that big a percentage of the taxpayers in Hillsborough County. And those taxpayers support HART with their tax dollars. They supported AFT. If we need to go back for a Plan B referendum, we will be asking them to support taxing the whole county to support transit, as well as other transportation improvements. And I think this is a very inexpensive, relatively inexpensive transit project, especially given the commitment by the HMS Ferry, the most premier ferry system in our country, who runs ferries in Seattle, runs ferries in New York City.
Has left the meeting.
To have them ponying up $100 million worth of operations and maintenance so that we are left with $34 million here of funding is an astoundingly economical transit project. When you contrast that with the $20 million a mile it costs for road widening, it's a project that could economically serve our South County population who is drowning in congestion and clamoring for relief. And they are very enthusiastic throughout South County of supporting the MacDill leg of commute, which, as Director Harden pointed out, these people are now driving all the way around the bay, contributing to the congestion at rush hour. And instead, we'd be able to take some of that off the roads and put that on ferries. But the South County communities are also very enthusiastic about the weekend and night service that we could start out with, taking people from South County to the city's regional, Tampa and St. Petersburg, and back. We have a large contingent in Sun City Center who would love not to be able to go spend their money at dinner and theater and museums in our cities, and would really love to do that by ferry, and are big supporters of this. So I think it's really important to be bringing the whole county along in our transit plans, and this is a very economical way to do it. Keeping in mind one ferry is worth something like 12 buses worth of people currently going back and forth just on the MacDill route. This is an important project for HART to support, and the next step forward is the PD&E, and I think the next place to go with this is to ask the county to partner with us by supporting that next step while we sort out the future of this very worthwhile project. So I'm going to be supporting it. I ask you all to support it. Let's see. I don't see any other.
My hands up, Madam Chair.
And yes, Commissioner Miller. Then
one quick question.
Ready.
How many cars will this ferry take off the MacDill to Tampa or whatever, South County, how many cars per day would it take off the road?
I know the answer, but I'm going to ask Mr. Taranchik because I know he does it too.
Am I unmuted?
You can hear you.
Thank you. Commissioner Miller, the initial ridership projections looks like it will take approximately 1,000 cars on month one off per peak period, which is equivalent about of a third of a lane of interstate. With 4 boats, we have the capacity to move this equivalency of one entire lane of interstate. For you to create that lane over that distance would cost $1 billion. The ridership, we've done 3 ridership surveys, and because the federal transit voucher covers either a bus, ferry, tram, or van pull ferry, tram, or car ferry, tram connection, those surveys indicate extremely high interest by MacDill employees. And Commissioner, you know, as a former military person, time and money for people in military is everything, and for this it saves them money and saves them time. So it can have the equivalency of an entire lane of interstate, but day one, month one, about 1,000 cars each peak period.
Okay, and you're absolutely right. I'm former military, and I know the importance of that. So we're talking about 1,000 cars. You're asking the county to put forth $2.4 million and a total cost of over $30 million to take 1,000 cars per day off the road. Okay, thank you.
All right. Seeing no further discussion, all right, staff, please call the roll. Roll call vote.
Thank you. Please say yes or no after your name is called. Director Castor? Director Castor? Director Hardin?
Yes.
Director Kemp?
Yes.
Director Knight?
Yes.
Director Mechanic?
Yes.
Director Miller?
No.
Director Overman?
Yes.
Director Schisler?
No.
Chair Smith?
Yes.
Director Vieira?
Yes.
Director Williams? The motion passes 7-2. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Miller and Mr. Taranchik, for your presentation. Our next presentation is the CSX Corridor Evaluation History. And that brings Ms. Beth Alden, Executive Director of the Metropolitan Planning Organization.
Matthew Miller
has left the meeting.
And Ms. Alden, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Directors. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, but I would again ask people to mute their phones. We are getting some additional ambient noise. Thank you.
Thank you. And you've heard about 2 really great opportunities to improve transit service to some key travel markets in our county. I'm going to talk about a third. And as a preface, want to restate something that Vic Vita said earlier in the meeting, which is that all of these would connect to and complement each other. They're all part of your adopted long-range transportation plan for seamless transportation service. And we are talking about different technologies and different opportunities. That is a result of years and years of study, looking at the best and least cost ways to serve those most intense travel needs in our county. So thank you again for the opportunity today. I'm going to be talking again about the reuse of the CSX-owned freight rail corridors that run through our county. Next slide, please. So they have been studied quite a few times in the past, quite a few times, including two major studies led by HART, a major investment study that concluded in the late 1990s with an environmental impact statement, and then an alternatives analysis that concluded in 2010. So both of those studies got to the level of detail of the Streetcar study that you saw this morning. There have also been many other studies. We have continued, as I mentioned, to include these corridors in our analysis for the long-range transportation plans, for many updates over the decades of the long-range plan. And TBARTA has studied the corridors, DOT has studied the corridors. So what I have for you this morning is an overview of why this continues to be in our plans. So I am not going to talk about all of the slides, because there are a lot of studies, a lot of slides. The slides that I've brought to you have dates in the bottom right corner generally, indicating when the study was conducted. So we're just going to kind of flip through those as fast as we can. And if you have questions or if you'd like reference documents, I'd be happy to provide those. So next slide, please. The key points that I want to make sure everybody understands about, why do we keep talking about this? So Hillsborough County does have 4 major job clusters that have about 300,000 jobs altogether, and the CSX corridors connect 3 of the 4 biggest ones, downtown, the USF area, and the west side of Brandon. When HART looked at the downtown to USF link with the alternatives analysis in 2010, HART concluded that there was no other continuous right-of-way available for rapid transit without removing lanes on roads. So HART looked very comprehensively at all of the road corridors between downtown and USF and concluded that the CSX-owned right-of-way would be a really good opportunity. That corridor also passes through multiple neighborhoods where bus ridership is high and is not heavily used by CSX for freight. It has also shown good ridership potential in study after study, and we've had favorable public opinion surveys for reuse of the freight rail corridors for passenger use, again, in study after study. So next slide, please. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through some of the previous work. Piece of background, this is all of the CSX-owned corridors through our county. Next slide, please. And then a couple of close-ups of the ones that I'm going to be highlighting in particular. So CSX refers to them as the Clearwater subdivision and the Brooksville subdivision. The Clearwater subdivision runs north from the Ybor City area. It's very close to the Selman Crosstown Connector, runs up to about Bush Boulevard, then turns west, runs parallel to Bush and Linebaugh over to Pinellas County. Next slide, please. The other subdivision that I'm going to highlight is the Brooksville subdivision, which goes north from the end of that Clearwater subdivision where it turns at Bush. So the Brooksville sub continues north, parallels Nebraska Avenue, then heads through Lutz next to US 41, and then on up through Pasco, Connerton area, ends in Brooksville. So these are both dead-end lines. Next slide, please. Our growth patterns, people have often asked questions about whether our growth is really too sprawled out to justify investing in fixed guideway transit of any kind. And so we've looked at this over and over again, looking at where do actually we have clusters of density. And so just a couple of snapshots in the next few slides. This was a visualization that was done probably 20 years ago now, but is still true. Next slide, please. We also look at it from the point of view of total daily car trips.
that converge on some of our major job centers. Next slide, please. In a later study, we looked at the actual percent of jobs that are concentrated in our largest centers. Next slide, please. It coming out of the Great Recession, there was an active focus on key economic spaces, so flagging those areas and what transportation investments would best support economic growth and leveraging the private sector investment that's already there. Next slide, please. That's still true in our growth projections today. You see here in the kind of peachy orange color is job density, and so you still see those clusters in our current forecast. So our current forecast takes our existing conditions and projects out where growth is likely to occur. Next slide, please. The planning in the past has focused on what can we do to connect some of those high-density job areas to our higher-density population areas. This is a visualization that was done about a decade ago, but again, it's still true. Next slide, please. HART's previous studies included detailed ridership forecasts of the CSX-owned lines. So this in particular, this is from HART's Alternative Analysis from 2010. And what you see here is the Clearwater subdivision going north from Ybor City through East Tampa, and then a portion of the Brooksville subdivision heading north of Bush Boulevard. North of that, HART was looking at actually a new piece of rail that would parallel Bruce B. Downs Boulevard. And so the ridership forecast that was done at that time reflects those station areas and numbers. But this honestly is just to give you a sense of that the ridership has been modeled. So we're going to flip through a few more slides. Next slide, please. T-BARTA has also studied the ridership. In 2009, the T-BARTA board voted to support the rail plans in Hillsborough County. It's the first phase of a much larger regional master plan. Next slide, please. And produced some diagrams of ridership density. I know we're going to see those diagrams. Next slide. Oh, yep, hit it again. So these were T-BARTA's. Yeah, could you go back just one for just a second? So that was T-BARTA's kind of heat map of the ridership. And so, again, you were looking at a portion of this regional system would run along the CSX-owned right-of-way that runs north from Ybor City through East Tampa up to Bush Boulevard, and then turns north and runs along Nebraska Avenue. So you see this segment again appearing in the regional master plan as one of the highest ridership density areas. Next slide, please. Ridership forecasts that we did 5 years ago indicated that particular corridor, which you see in the orange dots on this map on the right, so the circles indicate the number of people getting on and off at particular stations. And our forecast 5 years ago indicated that the boardings would be kind of similar to what Sunrail is getting on a line that's only about a third as long as the Sunrail line in Orlando. Next slide, please. And we've modeled it again in the long-range transportation plan that was adopted last November. So again, you can see the dots for the station locations, and the size of those dots indicates the number of people getting on and off. Next slide, please. And the coloring on the next slide indicates the segments with the highest ridership density. So again, that downtown to USF along the CSX corridor shows up in the dark red color. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that public opinion has continued to be supportive of reusing the freight rail corridors. So I'm going to flip through a few slides about public opinion surveys. This one, again, was from 5 years ago. We had, I think, 2,500 responses on this survey, but of all of the major investments that we put out to the public, the one that was the most popular was the idea of having rail from the downtown to USF and Tampa International Airport, up at the top of this bar chart. Next slide, please. And so some other public opinion research that we've done, we did do some focus group research after the 2010 referendum failed, and found that people did not have a real clear understanding of how rail might work here. And so the recommendation out of that research was to create familiarity with rail by creating a demonstration line and address the concerns about high costs. So next slide, please. So we found out with a follow-up study that the most popular, and go ahead and hit that one more time. The most popular description of rail in looking at it in comparison to all other types of transportation investments in Hillsborough County was describing it as a demonstration rail line on underused freight tracks and that could be expanded to serve other areas in the future. So next slide, please. So this has continued to show up in our opinion surveys for our most recent long-range plan update. We did a 2018 Tri-County survey. Next slide, please. And up at the top of the list of improvements, so over on the left side of your screen, you see the most popular.
Has left the meeting.
And they were, and hit it again, please, if you would. They were statewide rail and local and regional rail. Next slide, please. And then when we focused on our county in particular, next slide, this was a very widely responded to survey with more than 5,000 participants from our county. Next slide, please. And again, when we put out a list of different types of transportation improvements, we found that investing in rail was up at the top of the list. Go ahead and hit that next slide, please. Okay, and one more time. So reuse the freight rail tracks up at the top, create a new rapid transit connection between downtown and the airport, because of course there are no existing freight tracks between downtown and the airport, and extending the downtown streetcar and modernizing it. Those were the top choices out of all of the types of transportation improvements that we put in front of the public with this survey. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about technology. HART's record of decision on an environmental impact statement for reusing that CSX freight rail corridor
has joined the meeting.
Contemplated light rail being the technology to be built. But in the decade and a half since then, there have been new types of rail cars created, which would be much less cost. And the reason why they would be much less cost is that they can run on the same track as freight rail because they are more crash resistant. But they are still modestly sized and nimble. So next slide, please. We were looking at this as a way to bring the costs down. These cost numbers are quite old, but you'll see down at the bottom of the screen, just for a point of comparison, what it would cost to build light rail between downtown and USF as compared to what we were calling hybrid rail, which is kind of similar to a light rail vehicle, but it's crash-worthy, and you put it on the existing freight rail track after refurbishing the freight rail. So significant cost savings if you go with this newer technology. Next slide, please. We might just have to flip through a couple now. Yep, let's flip through the next slide. Okay, so I want to also talk about T-BARTA looked at this as well with their regional transit feasibility plan. So they looked at this same technology in the same corridor. Next slide, please. Again, found that electric and diesel multiple unit. Go ahead to the next slide. It's going to be, a lower cost solution than building light rail. Next slide, please. And they put forward a cost breakdown of, what we would have to come up with at the local level if we were going to move forward with a project like that, proposing a 25% local share to build, matched by a 50% construction share from feds and a 25% from the state of Florida, assuming that we were lucky enough to get that. But they were basically doing this analysis for us. Next slide, please. And in fact, this project, reusing the CSX rail corridor between downtown Tampa and USF, go ahead to the next slide, please, was in their top 2 picks for the region as a whole. My slide's not advancing. Is your slide advancing? There we go. Okay, so these were the top 2 choices out of T-BARTA's look at all of the possible fixed guideway connections that they would recommend we invest in as a region. So their number 1 project is the I-275 shoulder running rubber tire solution, but their number 2 project was the CSX rail corridor. Next slide, please. And it compared favorably in a lot of ways. One of those was the job estimate, for example. So they estimated 83,000 jobs on their top corridor, 42,000 jobs on the CSX corridor. But the CSX corridor is a quarter the length of the I-275 BRT. So just for the sake of comparison, we are with the CSX corridor focusing on some of the, most dense job areas in the entire West Central Florida region. Next slide, please. And we might have to just flip through. Let's just flip through a couple of these slides. There's plenty of background information here, 41 miles versus 9 miles. Next slide, please. Okay, so I wanted to also mention that CSX Corporation, so we've been talking a lot about reusing their property, right? CSX came to the Tampa Bay Transportation Management Area Leadership Group, which is the group of 3 MPOs in Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Pasco, a few years ago. Next slide, please. To talk with us about this opportunity, and they talked about it in the framework of their entire system for moving freight. Next slide, please. And they shared that they would be willing to look at joint use of the Brooksville and Clearwater subdivisions. And they pointed out something that had already been highlighted in some of the studies, that light rail is not the right technology. So we agree on that. Next slide, please. Of course, the devil is going to be in the details in working with CSX, and we would need, I think, the help of the Florida DOT to negotiate with CSX on how to ensure safety, ensure that they can continue their freight capacity, address liability for any crashes. So those are points that would have to be negotiated. The Florida Department of Transportation did lead that negotiation process in the Orlando area. So I'm hopeful that if a project does get moving in this area, that we'll be able to work with Florida DOT to help move that forward. Next slide, please. And I think I just had a couple more things. So this talk shows you a little bit about what we were talking about with Sunrail. The orange corridor over on the right is the Sunrail corridor that the state negotiated for. The yellow on the left those are the CSX corridors that we might want to consider negotiating for. So again, the Clearwater subdivision, the Brooksville subdivision. There's also a small piece that runs in South Tampa called the Port Tampa Spur. CSX was operating up to 30 freight trains a day on the corridor that became the Sunrail corridor. That is way more freight than are operating on our lines. Next slide, please. So we did look up the number of trains per day and week. The Brooksville subdivision and the Clearwater subdivision, we're talking about between 1 to 3 trains per week on these lines, which is why CSX is interested in talking with us about shared use, because it would get more use out of the property that they own. Next slide, please. And the City of Tampa is ready to go, has already adopted provisions for transit-oriented development. We did a couple of sketch plans of what that could look like. The pink line over on the right side of your screen, again, is that CSX corridor running through East Tampa. Next slide, please. And so we looked at, just a couple of locations. How could they redevelop? So here you are looking at the intersection of East Hillsborough Avenue and the CSX freight rail line. You see 22nd Street kind of on the left, and just kind of at the south end of this map, you see the Middleton High School track. So next slide, please. We looked at a sketch of Tampa's existing policies in the Tampa Comprehensive Plan, what that could mean if this area redevelops around a rail line. So these are the land use categories. Next slide, please. And if you redevelop that area, so it's basically north of Middleton and south of Hillsborough Avenue, if you redevelop that with some multifamily housing, office, mixed use, next slide, please, at some higher densities, what that could potentially look like in maybe bringing some new opportunities to East Tampa. So next slide, please. And so I'm wrapping up here with HART obtained a federal record of decision on an environmental impact statement in 2002 for putting passenger service on this rail corridor. If HART wanted to revisit this idea, the next step would be to create a supplemental environmental impact statement, or SEIS, similar to what the Department of Transportation just did with the I-275 segments running through the center of Tampa. So next slide, please. And this is just a map of the corridor for which HART obtained a record of decision a number of years ago. Next slide, please. And so HART asked the MPO earlier this year to include on our priority list of all transportation needs in our county, that we prioritize state and federal funding to do a follow-up study of this rail corridor. On June 30th, at our public hearing to adopt our priority list, the MPO actually moved that study farther up on the priority list and put it at the top of the category of major projects for economic growth. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for having me this morning.
Thank you, Ms. Alden, and thank you for running through that so quickly. It's a lot there, and we all have this in our backup packets to go back through, and appreciate this very much. This is our third fixed guideway project this morning, and they're all three very exciting to me. Commissioner Kemp, you are recognized.
There I go. Thank you. Every time I see one of the presentations, I learn more about it, and I also become just incredibly excited about what our opportunities are. And we look at something like the Ferry.
Let me interrupt you for a moment.
Sure.
somebody who is not muted on one of their devices. So we're getting a lot of feedback. Would everybody please mute all your devices? Yes, thank you.
There we go. Thank you. This is just so incredibly exciting when I think about the ferry and the opportunity we have with water to move people in such a great way. And so, inexpensively. We also have this incredible opportunity with these CSX tracks across the country. Other communities have done this. We have them placed in the area that is the most transit dense area in the entire region, this opportunity to convert them at relatively low cost. And, and I won't go into it, but what I think has been misleading to people about some presentations, not yours, that have been made in the past, is these lines go straight up to the University of South Florida. I've stood on those tracks and looked at the university. I think it's really important for people to know that it goes right from there to downtown, right through Ybor, right through downtown, right next to the Art Museum, right through South Tampa. It's an amazing opportunity for us to use existing tracks. And I've also, we also have an extension for those for Commissioner or Councilman Schisler. The right of way for these tracks to continue goes straight across to 56th Avenue in Temple Terrace, and that I have asked, and the County Commission passed unanimously near Mosey for us to preserve that those right-of-way for tracks in the future, should we be able to bring this to fruition. I'm just wondering right now, I know we have made actually a unanimous approval of this board to move forward with CSX over and over again. We've confirmed that with the MPO, and I'm just wondering what you've suggested a first step here with the SEIS. How much would that study cost? Is that the study that is on the MPO tip list?
Yes, that's right. And I think HART is taking the appropriate next step in looking at a feasibility study first to update some of those feasibility considerations. But again, yes, then you would want to move forward with probably if the board cares to a more costly study, an environmental impact study update. And so putting that on the MPO priority list helps us seek state or federal grant support for HART to be able to do that.
And at any time we could do that, should we be able to see that we will get funding or through HART, through the sales tax or otherwise?
Sure, the sales tax would be another opportunity if that's available.
Okay, but you're saying the feasibility study done now would be the step we should be taking now, and that perhaps passing this we should, or an SES as a further board action, we should wait to do that?
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I know HART's been been looking at the next steps for a feasibility study, and I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I see no more hands raised. No further discussion. All right, and thank you very much.
My hand's raised.
Oh, sorry. There's a bit of a delay, Councilman. Thank you for being patient. Councilman Schisler, you're recognized.
Yeah, just curious, how much will this? Very good presentation. Thank you very much. It's got a lot of potential opportunities. I just wonder if I wonder if the whole project is as extensive as we hope it will be. But my question in the short run is, how much would a new feasibility study or this next feasibility study be? Any guess? Anybody?
I turned off my video by accident. I believe HART earlier was talking about a feasibility study in the range of like $100,000 to $120,000, something like that. And so that would be helpful in looking at, for example, like the existing condition of the track out there and what would be needed to refurbish it, and coordinating with some of the neighborhoods, as I think was mentioned by one of your public commenters this morning.
Okay, thank you. I don't know how we could do any more until we hear anything on the sales tax. It's great, it's cool, it's fun, it looks like it'll be good, but I just don't see how we should even entertain anything else until there's resolution of tax and more likely the subsequent passing of the new referendum, because I expect it to go that route. But anyway, I understand the benefits of light rail. I grew up in the Reading system up in Philadelphia, and rode it for the time I was about 12 years old. So I fully understand what it can do, and very sympathetic to the need, but just talking. And until we have something that we can back up to talk, I think it's a waste of everybody's time. Just a personal opinion.
Thank you. And Commissioner Overman, you're recognized.
Thank you, and I thank you, Ms. Austin, for providing us with the details to understand exactly what the benefits are and what our next step would be. Given that a feasibility study needs to be done, and it seems to currently be without any resolution on the sales tax, surtax funds being available, the estimate of the feasibility cost is something we'd have to delay, or moving forward on it, we'd have to delay until we get an answer on the surtax given our current budget situation. But I would ask that staff really take a look at what steps and the timing should we get a resolution on the surtax that's not an adverse decision. And then also explore where any kind of federal transit resources could assist us in taking that, and paying for that feasibility study. There has been of late additional FTA dollars for various different projects to assist agencies in moving forward certain projects that would otherwise be at risk of moving forward. And so I would ask staff to consider, researching if there's any funds to take the next step. Because it's very clear these are long projects. They take a long time to move forward. We've been talking about this for 20 years. And the longer we wait to move forward on something like this, the more difficult it is as the Tampa Bay area continues to grow, and as we continue to grow from a perspective of planning of, creating density, which makes it really difficult to build something when you've got a bunch of other buildings already in the way. So I would ask staff with the MPO as well as HART to explore ways that we could move forward with a feasibility study and find the funding if possible, given that the surtax is not available. But I would like to see the feasibility study done if that's what's necessary to take the next step. And I'll stop there rather than make a motion, but I believe that we would be wise to look for the resources and find ways that we could begin the feasibility study as soon as possible.
Thank you. And Councilman Vieira, you're
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that very much. I just wanted to agree with Commissioner Overman in the spirit of her remarks, especially that, again, as I said before, when it comes to the AFT surtax, we hit a home run with that. We had areas throughout the county, as Chairwoman Smith said, that supported this initiative widely. And, there may be some legal challenges therein, but if, God forbid, it doesn't go our way in that regard, we can come back in 2022. In other words, my point is we've seen what's possible in our community. We've seen what's possible. I'll just be frank. When AFT was first brought up, I endorsed it, strong supporter of it, but I, like many, privately thought, hey, maybe this isn't going to pass just based on history, but it did pass. And I hope that everybody who's here putting forth these big projects appreciates the fact that all of this is being brought forth because of AFT and the hard work that so many good people put forth because of AFT. That has been a game changer for all of us. And when we have been so close to that, and if things don't go our way, we can get right back there in 2022. I think that putting on the brakes like that wouldn't be the wisest choice. I appreciate the arguments that have been made on the other side. I really, really do. But again, I think putting on the brakes with regards to planning when we've seen what's possible and when it can happen again if it has to, wouldn't be the wisest choice in my opinion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Commissioner Kemp?
Yes. Thank you. I'd just like to say $120,000 for a feasibility study is totally de minimis in terms of our budget, even this year. And we did get $39 million from the CARES Act. We get our ad valorem, I think, this year, which this year won't be reduced, is about $44 million something, from what I understand. I'd like to make the motion. I think it holds you up years and years not to move forward. And when you have a de minimis investment like this to move the project forward, and that's what I think is important about something like the Ferry project, that we just move on all these so that when we have our opportunity, we can go forward. And I think it's important to get these studies lined up in there. So I'll make a motion that HART support a feasibility study to go forward on the CSX corridor at this time.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Kemp to move forward with a feasibility study for this CSX project. Do we have a second?
I'd be interested in seconding it, but I do have a question regarding the motion.
Sure.
And it's mostly for staff and the understanding of how CARES dollars work and what we can use it for and what we can't use it for. Can the finance office or someone from the financial end of this HART staff talk about whether or not these funds can be utilized for this feasibility study at this time?
Great. We've got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Kemp, second by Commissioner Overman, and possibly Ms. Stiglitz could address the questions raised by Commissioner Overman.
Yes, Madam Chair. For the record, Cindy Stiglitz, Interim CFO for HART. So when I present the capital budget to committee in August, I was presenting a small contingency that has been unallocated. What we are effectually doing is using the CARES funding to support our operating expenses and reallocating our ad valorem and general fund to capital projects. So this would be an eligible way in which we could spend those reallocated dollars.
Thank you, Commissioner Overman.
Thank you. That's exactly what I needed to know. Thank you very much.
All right, and I don't know whether to mention we may get a little bit more from the county in our latest budget discussions, but fingers crossed, we may have a little more wiggle room too, just a tiny bit. So, motion on the floor, and is there any discussion? Seeing none, going once, twice. Okay, seeing none, let's take a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. This is Danielle from HART. Please say yes or no after your name is called. Mayor Castor? Director Hardin?
Yes.
Director Kemp?
Yes.
Director Knight? Director Knight? Director Mechanic?
Yes.
Director Miller? Director Overman?
Yes.
Director Schisler?
No.
Chair Smith,
Yes.
Director Vieira.
Yes.
The motion passes. Director Knight. Chair Smith, the motion apparently does not pass because you do not have, the quorum would be 7 and only 6 approved.
Well, we have a quorum of 7 votes. So we have a quorum, right? But the motion passed within that.
But the motion
6-1.
Right.
I do apologize. Yes, I do apologize. The motion does pass 6-1.
Thank you. But it's good to note that we just barely have a quorum. Is there any further discussion on this CSX item? Seeing none, I'll thank Ms. Alden again for coming today. Board members, we may have action item related to General Counsel's report regarding the whistleblower complaint that you've all gotten. Actually, I don't know that it's a whistleblower complaint, but a complaint. And before we lose our quorum, let's take a roll, make sure we still have 7, because I heard somebody left the meeting, and then I would entertain a motion to change the agenda to address the General Counsel's report. If we in fact do have a quorum still, to address that before we move on with the rest of the agenda. So would staff please take the roll?
Please say here after your name is called. Director Castor. Director Harden. Director Harden.
Here.
Director Kemp.
Here.
Director Knight. Director Knight. Director Director Mechanic.
Here.
Director Miller. Director Overman.
Here.
Director Schisler.
Here.
Chair Smith.
Here.
Director Vieira.
Here.
Director Williams.
All right.
So we have 7, so we do have quorum, Madam Chair.
This is Mechanic. I'll make a motion to move the agenda item up, the General Counsel item, to where we currently are on the agenda.
Second.
All right, let's take a roll call vote on that motion.
Thank you. Director Harden?
Yes.
Director Kemp?
Yes.
Director Mechanic?
Yes.
Director Overman?
Yes.
Director Schisler?
Yes.
Chair Smith?
Yes.
Director Vieira?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Director Knight is back on.
Thank you, Director Knight. Please add him to the roll. So,
And yes to the motion.
all right. Thank you, Director Knight. Mr. Smith, would you mind pulling up your item at this point?
I'd be happy to do so. And let me first give you a little bit of background, and then I'll talk about some potential motions that you want to entertain. As you know, someone probably has to put their phone back on mute because we're getting a lot of feedback. I'm not sure who that is, but.
Director Knight, please mute your phone.
So, thank you. All right. As you know, there was an anonymous ethics complaint filed against the interim CEO, Carolyn House Stewart. It's important to make sure you understand that this is actually a ethics complaint under our HART board policy. It is not a state whistleblower act. It does not follow the requirements of the whistleblower, nor does it have the various confidentiality protections otherwise. It is under the HART board policy. The allegations are that there's been an abusive, hostile, humiliating, bullying, and related behaviors evidenced by the interim CEO. It is an anonymous complaint, and it requests that the interim CEO be put on paid leave in order for the investigation to go on unimpaired. It's important to remember these are only allegations at this point. They're anonymous allegations. They're somewhat conclusory, as you have seen in the complaint itself. There's not a lot of backup information about that. That having been said, obviously we have to take the complaint seriously because it does allege a violation of HART policy, which, if accurate, would place persons working at HART in an environment that we do not wish them to be under based on what the policies say. And we do have to follow the process of the complaint. It's only fair for Ms. Stewart that there is due process provided and an investigation is appropriately conducted. In reviewing this with outside labor and employment counsel, Cindy Townsend, she cannot do the work, and nor can the other counsel, because they work directly with the interim CEO and would not be considered to be fully and truly independent. What Ms. Townsend recommended is there's two people she works with in these situations that do an independent investigation that don't have any ties with any of the parties, and those are a person by the name of Dolores Green, goes by Dottie, and Deborah Brown. They're both labor and employment lawyers. Ms. Green works out of Orlando. Ms. Brown works out of Tampa. They both have approximately the same rates. They have a public sector rate of around $2.50 an hour, which is about not quite half of what their normal rate is, but that's good. We appreciate that. The problem here is the key for both of them is availability. And we do not want such as this to hang out pending for too long a period of time. So that is an issue that we're going to have to address a little bit further. But let me first clarify your options.
Has left the meeting.
There's a primary option right now, which is to either follow the recommendation or the request of the complainant, which is to remove Ms. Stewart with pay pending the investigation, or the other option is to simply direct Ms. Stewart to not have anything to do with the investigation and to not impair it in any way and to not have any communications with the identified witnesses during the course of the investigation, and then obviously continue her in place. So that is an initial decision that needs to be made. Originally, I may have spoken with some of you about the possibility of having a probable cause hearing, which would have meant we'd have a preliminary investigation by the investigating attorney, whichever one is selected, and then we would, from there, decide how much more significant time needed to be spent on an investigation. The problem is, as I thought more about this is not what I'd call an actionable complaint, meaning it's not necessarily an allegation of a violation of law that would be actionable in a court of law. It is at root currently an allegation of a violation of board policy, and that's the board policy against bullying, intimidation, and hostility. There's other issues that may have to be proven in order for this to be cognizable at law, such as discrimination based on race, gender, or age, things of that nature, which right now are not being alleged as far as we can tell. Matter of fact, they're being disclaimed as applicable. So the first issue is I need, I believe, a motion to commence the investigation, and I recommend that you approve the retention of an outside independent investigating attorney to look at the complaint, and that it be either Ms. Brown or Ms. Green, and that you authorize the chairperson to participate in those discussions with me in order to confirm which one of those two has the availability necessary to move on this in an expeditious manner. I think that'd be the first action to be taken, and then secondly, we'll get back to the issue of Ms. Stewart's position in the interim.
This is Commissioner Kemp. I'll move that.
Schiffler, second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Kemp and a second by Councilman Schiffler. I'm going to, before I open the floor for discussion and action, I just want to offer some opening remarks here from the chair. I'm sure I'm speaking for everyone when I say that it is important that we handle this complaint in a way that makes it clear to all HART employees how we would handle any complaint made by any one of them, and also how we would handle any complaint made against any one of them. So we will try to put ourselves in the shoes of someone who needs to make a complaint and put ourselves in the shoes of someone who becomes the subject of a complaint. And, of course, we need to address each and every complaint that comes to us in a measured, step-by-step way. And we have good advice from our general counsel as to what the next step is, and a motion on the floor to take that step of commencing the investigation by Commissioner Kemp, and second by, was it Mechanic?
It was Schiffler.
Okay. And so, Commissioner Kemp, did you had your hand raised? Did you want to say anything about the motion?
No, I didn't. I just had my hand raised from before. Apologize.
All right. Commissioner Director Mechanic, you had a hand up to the motion?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I would just like to say I don't think this board has any choice but to initiate an investigation. There's no other option that would be suitable under the policies of the board. Having said that, the motion didn't include a selection of the attorney. Mr. Smith, could you advise of the two who might have received a more favorable recommendation, something to go on? One person is in Orlando, one is local. That might be a factor. Could you help us with that, Mr. Smith?
Yes, I'd be happy to provide you more information. Essentially, much of this investigation is probably going to be undertaken virtually. So the location is not as big a factor as it normally would be. And the problem we've got is both of these lawyers are very busy during this time period. And we're going to get some more information. One of them had 2 negotiating sessions today that could have ended the investigations that she's working on that would make her much more available. The other attorney is about to start on a 2-week vacation on Wednesday. So the reason I was suggesting that you authorize the chair to pick one of the two, they're both very qualified, and I think they both would do an excellent job. I've checked with some of the labor lawyers in my firm, the old Thompson, Sizemore, and Gonzalez firm, and they're both well thought of. So I don't think that the authority could go wrong by choosing either one of them. That's why I was suggesting we leave it open for discussions between the chair and me to find out which one really has the time to spend on this so it doesn't pen too long. That was my suggestion. But if you want to pick one or the other, you could do so. And if they're not available, we could follow up with the next one. Either way.
No, now I understand. I think it's fine that you would delegate to the chair the selection. I would only maybe suggest that we say, because you're suggesting that either one of them could have scheduling or timing problems, perhaps the chair should be authorized to choose a third person, attorney, at her discretion in light of the circumstances, so we don't have to wait too long here.
I think that's excellent.
Comment, Director Knight.
Director Knight, just a moment. Where are we on this motion does the original motion include, or do we need an amendment from Director Mechanic to specify the selection process that was clarified there?
Unless Ms. Kemp wants to amend her motion.
I'll withdraw my original motion and amend it to include a third choice if necessary, or to be made by the chair.
Right, because you were moving the selection process as well as the commencement of the investigation. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, great. So we have a motion and a second, and Director Knight, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My concern is, with this, why wasn't it brought up earlier? We had almost 100% of the board present today. I would love for something to take place, but can we have an emergency meeting to try to get more input, get a little bit more information, and address it right away? I don't care even today, tomorrow, or when, to try to reach out for more members, and with the expertise some had, including former Chair Miller, that we could really respond to this. In fact, we probably should have did it way before now, but I think that, yes, we need to address it. But what about others on the board? Can you, do you want to consider that and not put it away for a while, but get a little bit more to address this on an emergency status?
Thank you, Director Knight. If we really have very little choice but to proceed with the investigation by an objective third-party investigator, like the motion is on the floor. I wouldn't want to delay that till we got more members back together and try to work with everyone's calendar, which, as you can see, is pretty difficult in the first place. So unless, you want to make some other motion, I think let's dispose of this motion on the floor to proceed with the investigation, and the results will come back to the board, and we can be sure, try to handle those when we have more people here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Director, I'm sorry. Director Vieira,
I apologize.
Did you have your hand up? Director Vieira?
Sorry, that was from before. My apologies. Thank you.
Okay. Did I hear someone else who wanted to speak to the motion?
Yes. Director Harden.
Thank you. Director Harden, you're right.
Thank you. So I understand that in the nature of this public board, in the context of what our authority is, that you're correct and that we have no choice to proceed. But as an individual who used to be the director of operations of the largest nationwide division of a publicly traded company, and it's concerning. I'm trying to understand exactly. So there's, so it's an anonymous complaint. It's not that council's keeping it anonymous. It's that we don't know who made it.
That's correct.
Okay. And so then what is the nature of the investigation that gets done in that instance? If you can't verify the allegations with the individual who made them, then what form does the investigation take is my question.
Okay, initially the investigation will seek to communicate with the complainant. The complainant can be communicated with through this is a portal. HART has established a ethics complaint portal, and the complainant can be communicated with. And so the first move, in my opinion, will be for the investigating attorney to try to communicate more thoroughly with the complainant and get specifics that ostensibly support the allegations. Okay. Because it seemed very clear in the last instance where there was a whistleblowing what that process was, and that would therefore ultimately be fair to everybody. But to have
an accuser who's, doesn't put their name forward is concerning for Mrs. House Stewart. Anyway, I'll support the motion, and I do believe that the chair is obviously qualified to make the decision. I like the idea that she can go to a third party if the other two aren't available. And I do agree that we need to deal with this swiftly.
Thank you. I see no further discussion on the motion to proceed with the investigation as described. Staff, take a roll call vote.
Thank you, Director Hardin.
Yes.
Director Kemp?
Yes.
Director Knight?
Yes.
Director Mechanic?
Yes.
Director Overman? Director Overman?
Yes.
Thank you. Director Schisler?
Yes.
Chair Smith?
Yes.
Director Vieira?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
All right. And Mr. Smith, it sounds like the one other thing we could consider today is the complainant's request that we remove the ICEO during the investigation or keep her in position while the complaint is being investigated. And I agree with Director Hardin and some of the other directors who have pointed out that the complaint before us is anonymous, it is very vague, and it is so far unsubstantiated. So it is quite unclear whether the allegations, if true, would be against our policies or exactly where we would end up with that. And of course, Ms. Stewart understands what the, how she would need to conduct herself during the investigation and not be discussing the allegations with any HART staff.
This is Director Hardin. I make a motion that we retain Carolyn House Stewart as interim CEO during the initial stage of the investigation until an additional normal meeting or emergency meeting of this board is determines otherwise. Thanks.
Thank you.
Schisler, second.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Hardin, seconded by Director Schisler, Councilman Schisler, to retain Ms. Stewart in her position during the initial stages of the investigation. Let me see if I've got any. I see no other discussion, comments from the board. Seeing none. Seeing none. So,
Commissioner.
yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Kemp. I just have a question. I had never heard of, I hadn't heard to the contrary, so I was surprised by the motion. But Mr. Smith, you said this was the first of recommendations?
No, I think what I said was originally we talked about maybe doing a probable cause hearing, but this was a request by the complainant that Ms. Stewart be relieved of her job in the interim so that she could not affect the investigation. And just by way of background, I'd like to add, Ms. Stewart and I have spoken about this, and she has indicated that she would not interfere in any way with the investigation.
Okay.
The policy doesn't require it either way. This is a board policy choice. That's why I'm reticent to meddle.
Right. I just find the motion unnecessary, and that nobody is making a motion to do anything to the status quo.
It's true that nothing could be done, and that would mean she stays in position.
I agree. I withdraw my motion. I withdraw it.
Okay, motion is withdrawn. Mr. Smith, is there anything else that we should consider in this matter at this point?
No, I think that's all that needs to be done at this point.
Thank you. Is there any further board discussion? Thank you. Let's see. Mr. Smith, did you have anything else on your general counsel's report? We could wrap that up before we go back to the presentation.
No, we've got a couple items coming to committees. As you know, we've got the interim CEO's contract coming to committee, and we've got a board policy on modification of the general counsel's policy and role in the organization coming to a committee. So nothing today, and Julia Mandel will be working with each of you board members on the workshop and discussion regarding procurement. So if there's any questions, concerns, or comments or preferences you want to communicate, it would be best to communicate that to Julia, because she's going to be participating in that workshop and will be leading that charge. And that's all I have for today.
Thank you. Board members, we're getting well into lunch hour, 12:30. I can stay here if you can. If there's no other request from the board to indicate otherwise, we would proceed with the final presentation, the Envision 2030 presentation by T-BARTA. And if y'all are going to stick it out with me, we can move ahead to that.
Chair, this is Commissioner Overman. I would absolutely love to stick it out with you, but I have another meeting in an hour that I have not gotten any of the data for. It's kind of important. So I will, unless you have a voting item, I'm going to but I will not be available to left the meeting. So, but I appreciate, I would actually suggest that maybe if the folks from T-BARTA are interested in bringing that back to the next meeting, it might be helpful, because I do believe that transit development plan is kind of important. So I apologize for not being able to stay, but I wanted to bring that to your attention.
Thank you. And I know Mr. Schisler will have to be leaving for the EPG in a little while as well. Let me ask the presenters of 2030. Mr. Ball, possibly, would you prefer to bring this back later, or go with it today without possibly losing a quorum for a vote on any action?
This is Bill Ball with Tyndall Oliver, representing T-BARTA. David Green's on the line as well, the executive director of T-BARTA. There's no action item required, but it's certainly the pleasure of the board.
All right.
We're certainly willing to come back if that's the pleasure of the board.
Councilman Schisler, I think in all fairness to T-BARTA and to the other members of the HART board, could we possibly move it to another time and push them to the beginning of the presentations? I think that the work that they've done is important, that everybody gets the opportunity to hear the presentation and ask any questions that they may have. I would like to suggest we just push it off to the next meeting. Unfortunately, the time is, we're losing people, they're dropping.
Right. I agree. Let me, I guess let's have that be a motion and a vote to move that to. Thank you, Mr. Schisler. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Hart, let's take a quick vote to move this to our next board meeting.
This is Danielle from HART. Please say yes or no after your name is called. Director Hardin?
Yes.
Director Kemp?
Yes.
Director Knight?
Yes.
Director Mechanic?
Yes.
Director Overman?
Yes.
Director Schisler?
Yes.
Chair Smith?
Yes.
Director Vieira?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. And Mr. Ball, I apologize, and I appreciate your patience and willingness to come back to our next board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
A participant has left the meeting.
All right. And that takes us to just the last couple of items, starting with the interim CEO report. Ms. Stewart, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good afternoon, board members. This is my 12th interim CEO ICE report that focuses on the areas of customer experience, community value, employee success, and financial performance. In the interest of time, the written report is behind tab 7, beginning on pages 230. The only thing that I would just like to update on is our COVID response and our numbers. Everything else is self-explanatory in the report. We had a total since April 14th, 2020 of 49 positive cases, 21 bus operators, 5 van operators, and 2 streetcar motormen included in that number. I'm pleased to report that 30 of those employees have in fact returned to work. We had 8 employees who were hospitalized, 7 have been released from the hospital, and 1 is currently hospitalized. And out of the over 604 employees that tested at HART, 17 reported testing positive. So we achieved our result of removing the asymptomatic employees from the workplace. So I wanted to bring that to the board's attention. Also to let you know that Mr. Colin Malloy, our Director of Safety, will be one of the speakers at the AFTER conference, and he will be speaking on HART's bus burial installations and our COVID response, which were noted to be best practices. Other than that, I have nothing else to add to anything that's already in the written report. And also just want to let you know that I did have a conference with the Mr. Joe Malloy, the CEO of BEAT, regarding our BEAT project. Our project is one of 6 projects that they're working on, including HART projects for PSTA and 4 routes in Orange County and a route down in St. Louis for the autonomous vehicle. The issues that I raised with him that stays on our radar screen that must be corrected is the response time for emergencies, the attendant on board hours, the audio announcement, the ADA lockdown for wheelchairs, the 30-day video retention, and the ADA accessibility for mobility devices. We are setting a tentative date of early September for the launch of the project, and we will let you know that date. Other than that, we need to put in the record that there have been no deviations from our procurements for the month of June, and the 3 sole source activities included Industry Safe, which is a safety management software in the amount of $35,238, $27,000 for an air conditioner chiller in the heavy maintenance building, and an expenditure of $12,715 for net application for the cloud management system of HART, and this is simply an annual renewal of the user license. Everything else in the report stays the same unless there are some questions.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart, and thank you for keeping it short. Are there any questions or comments from the board? All right. Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Stewart.
You're welcome.
The only thing I would mention as regards the chair's report is that our executive search firm has begun interviewing board members, as you know, and you've all received a written questionnaire as well to help them draft a recruitment profile for the position of CEO, and they will bring that back to us along with draft text for the advertisement soon. They anticipate that we will be able to begin interviewing candidates around late October. So we are on pace to get that wrapped up. We have a workshop on Friday, August 7th at 1 p.m. for review of our procurement policies in a workshop. And then we have 2 public hearings coming up, the 14th of September and the 28th of September, both on the annual setting of the millage for HART. I think that's it, except to mention that the governor has extended the exemption for public entities to meet virtually until September 1. So our procurement workshop on August 7th will be virtual, and we'll just see how the hearings in September go. that finishes up my report. We have sections 10 through 12 of the agenda are all reports that are in your backup packets. And I see one hand raised. Mr. Harden.
Yes, quickly. With regards to the interim CEO search, I think there had been mention, I know that during the last cycle, that, a salary study, and I was, realized after we voted to push this off the dock with the RFQ last time, that there had been no discussion of what those parameters were. I assume, has this gone out at the same parameters that we went out previously? And is there an opportunity maybe to add this to the workshop that's already scheduled for discussion when the whole board is available? My concern is that the salary range for the talent level that we were looking for is not commensurate with what our competitors are paying.
I believe that will be part of what comes back to us in the draft from the executive search firm, and I don't know if you've discussed that with them in your interview. Is Mr. Edmondson possibly on the line to talk about that search, or David Smith to answer the question of when does the salary discussion or setting come into the procurement and hiring of the CEO process?
John, are you there? If not, I'll address the issue. I don't hear anything from John. Essentially, that will be.
I'm sorry, David. I am here.
All right, go ahead, John.
When the board members receive a draft of the announcement that is to be advertised for the CEO recruitment, the brochure and whatever the content actually looks like, that will be the time for the board to make a determination on how they want to address the salary that's going to be offered, or the salary range is going to be offered as part of that campaign. That'll be. I don't have any insights yet as to how that information is going to be presented, whether it would be presented to all board members concurrently in a virtual setting or individually just through email. But that will be the time for members to express their desire about what they want the salary range to reflect.
All right, thank you. I think that answers my question. I thought last time when we approved the RFP that at that same meeting we had voted on the salary range cap and, slash cap. And so great. If that's coming back to us, that was my question. Thank you. I have nothing else.
You're welcome.
All right. Any further discussion about anything, including the reports that are in your backup packet? Any old business? Any new business? Seeing none, speak now, forever hold your peace. And I see no further comments by any board members, so this brings us to adjournment. Thank you very much. You all have a good afternoon.
Has left the meeting.
Bye.